I declare open this fifth hearing of the Senate Foreign Affairs, Defence and Trade References Committee's inquiry into the management of defence estate assets. The committee will be conducting today's hearing in person and via teleconference. I'm Senator Collins, Chair of the committee, and I'm joined in the room by Deputy Chair Senator Ciccone, Senator Blythe, and Senator Henderson will be on her way shortly. Senator McLaughlin is also joining us by teleconference. These are public proceedings being audio streamed live via the Parliament's website, and a Hansard transcript is being made. I remind all witnesses that in giving evidence to the committee, they are protected by parliamentary privilege. It is unlawful for anyone to threaten or disadvantage a witness on account of evidence given to a committee, and such action may be treated by the Senate as a contempt. It is also a contempt to give false or misleading evidence. Witnesses also have a right to request to be heard in camera. If a witness objects to answering a question, they should state the ground upon which the objection is made, and the committee will determine whether it will insist on an answer having regard to the ground which is claimed. If the committee determines to insist on an answer, a witness may request that the answer be given in camera. I remind senators of the obligations under the Behaviour Code for Australian parliamentarians to treat witnesses with dignity, courtesy, fairness and respect. I remind committee members and witnesses who are appearing via teleconference and who are not speaking to please mute their microphones, and if you would all please also put your phones on silent, that would be very helpful. I now welcome representatives from Save Western Port. I understand that information on parliamentary privilege and the protection of witnesses giving evidence to the Senate committees has been provided to you. For the Hansard record, will you please state your full names and the capacity in which you appear today?
Jane Russell Carnegie, and I am the President of Save Western Port.
Thank you. I now invite you to make a short opening statement. We have about 25 minutes for this particular session, and then we can move on to questions from the senators.
Thank you very much, Senator Collins, and thank you, senators, for this opportunity to speak on behalf of our submission. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we meet, the Wadawurrung people of the Kulin Nation, and I pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. My name I have given. I just want to focus on what are key concerns for your inquiry, which focus on two aspects. One is the actual audit and process now underway, and the other is HMAS Cerberus, which is on the Western Port part of the peninsula. In terms of the audit report, I think there are some really significant systemic failings related to that report, and I would just like to quickly go through those. Firstly, the terms of reference for the audit were too narrow, and they drove the approach of the consultants. In particular, there was no terms of reference which covered environmental issues related to any of the divestment sites, nor consideration of traditional owners. The second point I want to make was that the audit was basically conducted in secrecy with no public consultation with the people of Australia. And that narrow lens also drove, we would say, some of the outcomes of the final report. We would also say that the report is not actually an audit. It did not comprehensively examine and report on any of the individual proposed sites for divestment. It provided no cogent, systematic analysis against any specified criteria to determine the basis for any of the divestments. In fact, there was really no information whatsoever on the sites. Despite this, the report initially recommended immediate divestment of 32 sites, with 36 requiring further investigation, including Cerberus. Yet, in the final report released by the government, all 68 sites were recommended for immediate divestment without this further analysis. And we would say there is no rationale, evidence or justification for the divestment of all the sites as now stands before us. We also believe that the audit never really identified the proposed revenue from the sale or any details of the costs of all the due diligence and remediation required on many sites. And if I use Cerberus as an example, those costs will be enormous. And there's also the costs of the actual process now underway, which I will come to now. So in terms of the actual process, again we say there are some systemic issues. The first of these is that communities who are really concerned, and we can see from the people around this room there are many communities concerned about this process, really had trouble finding out about the process. There was very little information. I know there was some national media given out by Minister Miles, but beyond that it's been really left up to communities themselves to try and discover what's actually going on. We had a consultation on the 10th of June for Cerberus, and I would argue that it was very badly handled, provided no detailed information about the process, and really left our community very distrustful of that process. We also know that the Mornington Peninsula Shire Council was not formally given an invitation to that meeting. They did not even know about it, which we would argue is insufficient. We also believe that the whole approach for taking submissions from the community is very poor. And what interested persons and organisations have to do is register their interest in the same text box, it's just a text box, with would-be developers. And there is no capacity to upload a detailed submission on all the very many issues we would have with Cerberus. To do that, you need to go to an email address, which I had to find out about from the Department of Finance. Again, I would say there's no transparency. The roadmap for divestment, which was provided to people as an A3 sheet at our consultation, provides a really clear indication of what the outcome of this whole process is, and it is commercial sale. It left no room for any other outcome. Despite this, these questions were raised at our consultation meeting, and the departmental representatives from both Finance and Defence said that transfer of land, for example, for conservation purposes, is a potential outcome, but that is not what their roadmap actually says. And we would say that Finance needs to promote these alternative options to the public so that interested persons can actually put that forward as a potential outcome from the process. Our next point on the systemic issues is the actual outsourcing of the key components of this roadmap to a strategic industry partner to undertake all of the due diligence, the risk assessment, and to actually come back and propose recommendations to the government on particular sites. And these are the aspects which require them to look at the legal and statutory framework before them, including environmental and heritage referrals. Now, that strategic industry partner is KPMG, and we would say the contract to KPMG is particularly concerning, not only because we don't believe that they have the capacity or expertise to do this sort of due diligence, particularly around unexploded ordnance and PFAS and things like that, but obviously also the current scandal about their business operations. I now turn to Cerberus. As our submission makes clear, the sale of Cerberus for commercial reasons should not take place. This site is of the highest environmental significance, with its varied ecosystems, intact ecosystems pre-colonisation, I would add, and the wide-ranging biodiversity values it holds, and particularly that its coastline borders the Ramsar wetlands of Western Port. And we have obligations internationally to protect those Ramsar wetlands. The other point is that Cerberus, the land itself, and they are proposing 1,184 hectares of land be divested, is mostly completely unsuitable for any purposes of development. It is subject to coastal inundation, rising sea levels, large tracts of marshland, mangrove, and it's subject to multiple overlays at both a state and council level. It's exposed to many large areas of PFAS and unexploded ordnance. And then there's the defence base itself, which will continue to operate, and that defence base is expanding. so it needs a very strong buffer around it for protection. So we would say that preservation of this site for conservation purposes must be the outcome. The land and the coastline should be part of our national reserve system in whatever form that might take, and we'd be really happy to work with parties to try and work that area so that it is protected for current and future generations. And we know that our position is shared by members of our community very widely and by our local council. In my submission, I didn't put any recommendations in, but I think it is important to help you with your report that you perhaps look at recommendations we would like to suggest. Our first recommendation to you is a new approach is needed. This may not be possible, but this is our recommendation. We believe the government needs to reconsider its approach to the divestment of defence assets, all defence assets. And what is needed is a detailed, systematic analysis of each site that is measured against clearly defined criteria, including environmental and its Indigenous significance, before this process proceeds any further. And that analysis should include genuine costings associated with any divestment. And the outcomes of that process should include potential for full or partial divestment or retention by defence. Now, retention by defence, as we understand it, is not on the table, and that should certainly be part of the whole process. And any reports coming out of that further investigation must be made public and transparent. Our second recommendation to you is about the industry strategic partner. We believe the Minister for Finance should reconsider KPMG's current contract, considering the current scandal and investigations by both ASIC and another Senate Estimates Committee. If the contract is retained, KPMG's role in the process must be clearly visible in all public communications, and any reports and recommendations must be made available for public scrutiny. To further ensure transparency, all environmental statutory requirements must be managed by the Department of Finance itself and not outsourced to KPMG. Our third recommendation to you is that the site of HMAS Cerberus should not be partially divested for commercial sale. The site should either remain as a defence asset, or if partial divestment must occur, then this should be through government transfer for the purposes of environmental conservation and protection. Finally, recommendation 4, as required under the current statutory and legal framework, this site must be the subject of a preliminary environmental and ecological assessment of its flora and fauna, including the ecosystem relationships with the surrounding green wedge and the Ramsar wetlands of Western Port Bay. And this should be undertaken by the Department of Finance as a preliminary report, and out of that, if necessary, it should either be transferred in some form, or if they continue to pursue the notion of divestment, then there must be a referral for a controlled action under the EPBC Act, and that we recommend that that process must take place now before any further consideration of this particular site. So we've emphasised the systemic issues with the audit and with the process. We failed to see how Cerberus or many other sites, including those with representatives here today in Queensland, could possibly be finalised in, did I say Queensland? Sorry, Queenscliff. Can be finalised in the 2-year frame. The 2-year time frame of the roadmap is an absolute nonsense. To go through the environmental processes alone will probably take us into 5 years. Cerberus should remain in the public domain. We understand your role as advisory, but we hope our presentation here today and our submission will help you in your deliberations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms Carnegie. I would also like to advise that representatives of the media have requested permission to film and take photographs of the committee's proceedings, and the committee has agreed to this. I remind the media that this permission can be revoked at any time, and the media must follow the direction of the Secretariat staff. If a witness objects to being filmed or photographed, the committee will consider this request. And the media are reminded that they are not able to take images of senators or witnesses' documents or of the audience. Is that right? Copies of Senate Resolution 3 concerning the broadcasting of committee proceedings are available from the Secretariat. Thank you very much for your statement, Ms Carnegie. You mentioned that there was a community consultation where 350, well, let's call it a community information session, where 350 people turned up. What sort of proportion of the community would that have been at that point of time?
Well, Senator Collins, I would say that's a really quite significant proportion of the community that surrounds Cerberus. So Cerberus is surrounded by 3 very small townships, if you could call it that. One is Summers, where I live, and so there's a lot of people there that are deeply concerned about this. And then it borders Crib Point and Bittern. So there's 3 little areas which is surrounding Cerberus. So 350, I mean, we didn't take a roll call, but put it this way, when people had to put in a registration for this consultation, the initial place that they proposed to do it was far too small for the number of people that actually registered, and so they ended up doing it in the Crib Point Primary School, and as I said in my submission, on a very dark, windy, horrible night in the middle of the week, and 350 to 400 people turned up for that.
Yeah, it's quite
it's a lot. It's a lot of people. If you look at the census, how many people actually live in those areas, it's pretty small.
You mentioned the Sale roadmap before. Do you have a copy?
I do have a copy before me, and this was provided at the consultation. I might say that what Finance and Defence representatives did is they put out a lot of glossy publications people could pick up on the way in, but they never talked to these points. They basically had no presentation about the process, and then they just opened it up for questions from our community. So people really were expecting far more than that from the consultation process, I would say. Now, the roadmap, which we will provide to you, basically calls for 8 different components to that roadmap. So, I'm sorry, audience, I have to do it this way. I need to just speak to it before you take to it. So here we have community and stakeholder input. And as I've said, that's ongoing. There's no deadline, there's no date, there's a tiny little text box to give consultation. Then we have stage 2 and 3. That is being handled by the Strategic Industry Partner, or KPMG. So all of the due diligence, which includes heritage and environmental assessment, contamination, planning considerations, zoning, site constraints and risk. And then they do a cost-benefit analysis of the financial, economic and social benefits for divestment. Note, environment is not included. They then give that to the government, to the Department of Finance and through them obviously to Minister Gallagher, to create an informed decision based on the consultation, the due diligence. Then the actual formal transfer to finance occurs, and then it will be released to market, open market, off-market, concessional rate, all sale. And then they negotiate the contract with the developers, and then they continue to try and deal with ongoing community outcomes. So that is their 8-stage process.
Is there anything in there about negotiations or contract building with the state government?
Nothing.
Nothing. Did you, at this information session, did you get the sense that the decision had already been made?
No. I'd have to say I got the sense that they were put on the back foot.
Who's they? Sorry.
The representatives from the Department of Finance and the Department of Defence. I can't remember exactly how many there were, maybe 5 or 6. but they certainly were put on the back foot by the level of representation from our community, the style of questions they were getting, and certainly they said loudly and clearly, and then in an email to me directly, which I can give to the committee if you want it, that the transfer of land is one of the options possible. So they really had to put that forward in that public process, and that's now been provided to me in detail in an official Department of Finance email.
You mentioned in your submission about the EPBC Act. Is there evidence that the EPBC Act is straining sustainment costs of bases like Cerberus?
Is
straining the sustainment costs, making it more costly?
No, not at all. Well, look, I can only talk about Cerberus, and obviously Cerberus has been part of the defence community since, I think, 1916. I might be wrong, but around that date. And all of that very, very pivotal, very important environmental land that surrounds the base has been managed by the base, and they have said to me directly, it is not a huge cost. It is not a cost because it's basically pristine environmental land. The only cost that they have to deal with is that they have fire breaks within those environmental systems, and so they maintain those fire breaks, and they also maintain the golf course, which is a public golf course and one of the few public golf courses on our side of the peninsula, which means it's accessible to people who otherwise can't afford the very wealthy golf courses that exist as well. So they're the only two main areas, other than the actual defence base itself, you know, where they do their work and where they live. But all of the surrounding environmental land, there is minimal cost.
And your evidence is that Defence has been a pretty good custodian of the land?
They have been very good custodians of the land, except for the PFAS, perhaps, but then they were unaware of that. And they have now, there's a very, and I've got details of that if you want that, process to clean up that PFAS as much as is possible. But the main area where the PFAS exists was they did a lot of firefighting drills and they used PFAS very widely, and the contamination was huge. They've now buried a lot of that contamination on site. But of course PFAS flows underground, and so it would be over many large sections of that site. And those in Defence that are managing this process have said that for the foreseeable future, PFAS will remain on the base.
Okay. Final question from me before I pass on to my colleague, Senator Henderson. The report uses language such as sites like Cerberus and Fort Queenscliff are a burden and legacy of the past. They are unsustainable because of the weight of its past. Would you agree with that?
I certainly do not agree with that statement. I'll leave it to representatives from Queenscliff to go into more detail there. But just in terms of Cerberus, there is, as I've said before, the cost of maintaining the site and really in providing, as it is, current environmental protection is minimal. It really is minimal because it's intact bushland. So I would argue that, or state to you, that the burden is absolutely minimal in relation to Cerberus. And to lose that site now would just be such a huge issue. Like it's a once in a generation thing to maintain the site, either within Defence or for other environmental purposes. But if we lose that site, it would be like losing Point Nepean, and I'm sure you're familiar with what happened at Point Nepean, and we now have this beautiful national park at Point Nepean. And Cerberus is of the same ecological value, possibly even higher than Point Nepean.
Thank you, Ms Carnaby. I'll now pass the call to Senator Henderson.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for appearing today. We are here as a Senate inquiry, and certainly from my perspective, don't speak for all senators as a participating senator, because we do not believe that communities around this country have been properly consulted in relation to what I think is a shocking fire sale of precious defence assets. Can I ask you about the lack of community consultation? If I could just ask you to make further comments in relation to that. It sounds very poor from what you've said already.
Thank you, Senator. Well, I think, as I said in my submission, our community was completely unaware of the audit that had been conducted back in 2023-22, whenever it was conducted, but the report I know was finalised in 23. So we had no idea until Minister Miles made his press statement back in February this year, and then the only reason we knew, because it sort of wasn't within our bandwidth as a local group, was because our local newspaper actually had seen the press release and took it up and made it front page news. And it was only then that we realised, wow, this is really, really serious. And it was following that I then got in touch with actually Department of Defence first, because I thought they were in charge of the process, till we found out later that they were a sideline to the process. And I say to their credit, and I will say this of both Department of Finance and Department of Defence, when I have emailed them, they have got back and answered my questions. So that is something that is a positive. But Department of Defence, I looked up the website that they put up, and there were no consultations for Cerberus. And I think, I'm not saying it was because of Save Western Port, but we pushed hard that there needed to be a public consultation because people deserved this to find out what was going on. And then they scheduled one for the 10th of June. And that's the one that I've talked about today. And then in terms of further consultation at that public meeting, it was made loud and clear to those representatives that we would want another further public meeting before any decisions are made, and that we need to be part of that decision-making process in relation to that site. So they took that on board, but we, wait to see, because, it's a huge process, and I don't know when that would be. But then the actual consultation meeting itself, which I've talked about, I would say there wouldn't be one person in that room that thought they had found out information that enabled them to know more about the process. As I said, this was given out, but we picked it up on the way in. We didn't read it. There was no presentation to take us through these steps and ask questions there and then. It was only following the meeting and our sort of trying to find out more and more information that we were able to actually ascertain, in particular, the fact that so much of it's been outsourced. So people left pretty disappointed. I would say there was a lot of anger in the room.
Ms Kennedy, I'm just conscious of time.
Yes, sorry.
Can I just ask you to summarise why Cerberus should not be sold off to the highest bidder? What are the precious parts of the estate that you're particularly concerned about? If I could just ask you to summarise your concerns. Okay.
Well, Cerberus, other than the base, so the area that they want to divest is pristine, pre-colonisation bushland with many varied flora and fauna. It includes endangered species that are currently protected by being a defence asset. It borders the Ramsar coastline of Western Port Bay. It is the home of many migratory birds, and we have international obligations to those international birds, particularly given bird flu at the moment. The nature of that flora and fauna is it's exquisite, and so obviously, because it's defence land, we haven't been able to go in and examine it, but there have been ecological surveys that have been undertaken, and it, includes old Banksia forest, 100 years old, other forests more than 100 years old. They don't exist anywhere else on the peninsula anymore, anywhere else. So to lose that would just be a disaster. And I do want to continue to point out that so much of the land, it will be flooded, it will be subject to inundation because of climate change. And so there's many areas that just are unsuitable, and so to leave it as it is in its pristine state is the best outcome for everyone.
Thanks very much, Ms Carnegie. Thanks, Chair.
I just have, and I'm very conscious of time, and it's just, sorry. And just to pick up, so the 10th of June was that community consultation where you had 350 to 400 people. So you're still waiting to hear back whether another community consultation will happen. Is that correct?
They did promise that would happen, but there was no deadline or further information provided.
Okay, and nothing's happened to date on that?
Nothing's happened to date,
other
than my follow-up emails on other aspects of the process, which I was deeply concerned about.
And because I'm just conscious, because this process is ploughing ahead, and as Senator Henderson has rightly pointed out, it is very complex and not something that the coalition is supportive of in its entirety in how this is being undertaken. In terms of the value of this, now this particular base for Cerebus is $1.8 billion, I understand. You've talked about beautiful, old, pristine environment that we have. We couldn't replicate that even if we tried. In terms of a price tag of, and that 1.8 billion may actually be quite heavily inflated and not really what the government would realise in any kind of sale. What is the cost? And I guess, we can put dollars on things, but to be able to replicate that, to be able to preserve pristine environment, is $1.8 billion or less worth it?
Senator, I just want to make clear, the $1.8 billion that I referred to in my submission is the total outcome of the divestment of all of the defence assets. That's all they think they will get because of the remediation costs.
Okay.
So that's the totality. That's every 68 assets, $1.8 billion is all they think they will get out of all of this and all of this pain for our communities.
Okay, so that's the...
Okay. Yeah, and so for Cerberus, I have no idea what the... because they never put it in their order, because there was no analysis of what would be if we sold off this 1,184 hectares in Cerberus, how much is it worth, what's the remedy? We don't know.
Imagine if we could open that up for the community.
Sorry?
Imagine if we could open that up for the community.
Yeah, absolutely, as a concept. Look, it is so powerful.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Senator Blyth. Thank you for appearing as a witness today, Ms Carnegie. The committee would appreciate, I don't think you had any questions on notice, but any questions on notice provided to the committee by Thursday, the 3rd of September.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I will now call representatives from Fort Queenscliff Heritage Association, but while we do this changeover, if anybody who has registered to speak in the, let's call it the open mic session at the end of this hearing, if you could please just come and have a quick word with Monica, let her know that you're here. That would be fantastic while we do the changeover. And please also note there are a couple of spare seats still at the front down here. Okay. I now welcome representatives from Fort Queenscliff Heritage Association, and I understand that information on parliamentary privilege and the protection of witnesses giving evidence to Senate committees has been provided to you. So for the Hansard record, will you please state your full names and the capacity in which you appear today?
Bob Marmion,
Fort
Queenscliff Heritage Association. Yes.
Andrew Dagg, the Treasurer of the Fort Queenscliff Heritage Association.
Thank you very much. If you'd like to make a short opening statement, you may, and then at the conclusion, the senators will ask a couple of questions.
Okay. Thank you, Senator, for allowing us to present to the inquiry. I'm the Secretary of the Fort Queenscliff Heritage Association. Andrew is the Treasurer. We're here to speak to and elaborate on our previous written submission. We are here to voice the Heritage Association's deep concern that the future heritage protection and preservation of Fort Queenscliff could be at risk under the Defence Divestment Program. No other heritage site in Australia has the unique qualities that Fort Queenscliff does from a military point of view, a maritime point of view and a civic heritage point of view. It is unique. The fort is of local, national and international significance and needs to remain in public ownership with the fullest possible heritage protections in place. The association also supports making the fort more accessible to the local and wider community through complementary civic and commercial uses. The Fort Queenscliff Heritage Association was originally formed as the Fort Queenscliff Museum in 1982, and over the last 44 years we've been actively involved in the research into the fort and the defences at the heads. We have over 1,200 members, known as Friends of the Fort, and our researchers range from doctoral level to genealogy and family research, and many of our members are also ex-service people. We are a tenant of the fort. We have a licence with the Department of Defence to operate tours and occupy some of the buildings. We generally attract 6,000 to 8,000 people per year on tours, and that includes a lot of school tours. And our tour guides constantly comment about the reaction of, especially school groups, that they're actually here at an original historic site that's being presented to them. It's not a replica of some colonial town or something like that. So we're well placed to actually advise on the history and heritage of the fort, and that's what we'd like to continue doing. Our concerns are numerous. We recognise the military, maritime, cultural, Indigenous tourism value of the fort and the heads, and we want to see that continue. We want to keep the fort in public ownership, ideally having a Fort Queenscliff Trust or similar place to manage the ongoing use and to provide income for maintenance and activities. We're also concerned about the heritage assets, and this can be done by heritage protections on one hand, but also allowing our association to run tours. There's ongoing heritage protection after Defence leaves. So if it leaves Commonwealth ownership, what protection is there? At the moment, there is no protection after they leave Commonwealth ownership. We had a problem a number of years ago with Crow's Nest, which was an army base on the outskirts of Queenscliff, and Defence divested it, and it went into private ownership, and the Defence facilities were demolished because there was no heritage protection. So we also have ongoing maintenance concerns, protection of the assets when Defence leaves on 30 June next year. We don't want to repeat a Fort Scratchley, where it took 15 years and $18 million to reconstitute or repair the damage done by vandalism when Defence left. We want immediate restoration of the signal station dating from 1888 in accordance with the current requirements under Defence asset management. There is considerable community support for our proposal. Fort Queenscliff was panned for divestment in the year 2000 when the Staff College went to Canberra, and there was a huge community backlash against that, and the backfill happened. We can't see a backfill happening now, but there is still the community backlash where we need to preserve the fort for future generations and allow it to be open to the public. The Defend Fort Queenscliff Alliance has been formed, and this has local, national and international support already to keep those, the fort in heritage protection and open. There's no point in transferring to the Victorian Government. It's not an option. The state simply does not have the money to maintain and restore the fort. In 1999, the federal government had proposed to transfer properties at Queenscliff and Nepean at no cost to the Victorian government. And due to the annual maintenance costs and heritage upkeep, estimated at $1.5 million every 5 years, the Victorian government refused the offer, but later reluctantly accepted significant funding for restoration works provided by the federal government. Over $30 million was spent on heritage protection. When you look at the state of the Fort Nepean at the moment, and we can produce a number of photographs showing the deterioration, this is what happens when it passes to state ownership and there's no money for preservation. So there's two views of Fort Nepean. Again, we don't want this to happen if it goes to state. Another example was Fort Scratchley. As I said, it took 12 years and $18 million to reconstitute Fort Scratchley after Defence left. Today, Fort Scratchley is a major tourist attraction in Newcastle. It attracts more than 1,800 people to major events. We recommend a Fort Queenscliff Trust in line with the Sydney Harbour Trust. An enduring example of success is the Sydney Harbour Trust, which was established by the federal government in 2001 to protect Commonwealth lands, including former defence sites around Sydney Harbour. This body has been very successful in maintaining the heritage values of the defence sites and opening them up for public use. If Fort Queenscliff is no longer required by Defence, logically it needs to change hands. So transferring to the state of Victoria is not an option at this stage because of the lack of funding available. Similarly, the Borough of Queenscliff, only 3,000 ratepayers cannot afford to run or maintain the fort. So we're looking at the trust as a best option. A Fort Queenscliff Trust under the Federal Department of Heritage will be best placed to oversee remediation, restore heritage assets, prepare buildings that may be leased to educational institutions, for example, and others, and operate a museum, conduct tours and open the gates to the public. We're also concerned about the current state of some of the assets in the fort. For example, the 1888 signal station. Originally, Defence allocated $1.4 million for the restoration of the project and then withdrew that funding. At the public hearings that Richard Miles and Ms Libby Coker called on 29th of April this year at Queenscliff RSL, they said that the funding would be reallocated. Quite frankly, we did not believe them. So we asked them, put it in writing. They didn't renege. So we have correspondence from Defence saying it's on, it's off. At the moment, the signal station is falling down, and we'd like to produce a photograph, if we haven't already done it. Oh yeah, showing the state of the signal station. Now that's just one example of the lack of asset maintenance that's happening under Defence at the moment. This fort is a priceless community asset. Its unique combination of heritage features means it goes beyond the remit of the Departments of Defence and Finance to determine its future. The issue is much wider national concern that warrants a holistic approach that shows vision and foresight. The Australian Government now has the opportunity to step in and transform the fortunes of this fort and this town and help safeguard the heritage and future of both. Fort Queenscliff Heritage Association stands ready to assist with achieving a smooth transition from Defence ownership into a public trust ownership model, and we are committed to ensuring that the past 40 years of protecting the fort's history and heritage are not lost in the process. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr Marmion. I might pass the call to my colleague, Senator Henderson.
Thank you very much, Chair. Dr Marmion and Mr Dagg, thank you very much for being here this afternoon, and thank you to so many from the Queenscliff and broader community for attending our very important Senate inquiry today. I am appalled by what is being proposed. This is a precious part of our community, and it is a precious military defence history asset for our country. So thank you for the impassioned plea that you have presented today. Can I just reiterate that the Coalition, if elected, has committed to keep Fort Queenscliff and Swan Island in Commonwealth hands. Can I ask you to summarise, Dr Marmion, why that is so important, why you don't trust what you've heard, including from Mr Miles, in relation to the assurances that you've been given?
Well, it's a unique historical and heritage place. We're talking particularly around Fort Queenscliff, but also Swan Island as well. It's unique in the country from both a military, cultural, maritime background. There is nothing like it, so it needs to be preserved. And what we're worried about, if it passes out of Commonwealth ownership at the moment, there are no heritage protections and the place could literally be demolished. Now, Richard Miles said it was 93% protected under Commonwealth legislation. That was only partly true. What he didn't say was that it was only whilst it was in Commonwealth ownership.
That's right.
So
So the heritage of this site is completely at risk if it was to move from Commonwealth hands.
yes,
And anything could happen.
yes,
There could be planning restrictions, there could be conditions of sale which could be overturned, for instance, by a state act of parliament.
yes.
So my concern is that Mr Miles, complete with Ms Coker, have actively misled the community. And I am particularly concerned because the stakes are so high. If this precious part of our community is sold off to the highest bidder, anything is possible. There could be a 5-star hotel there and the community could be locked out. So in terms of community access, can you also explain why community access is so important going forward?
Well, I think it's critical to share our history and heritage, our military history and heritage with the wider public. We get 6,000 to 8,000 people through a year and they're amazed at what is there. It's unique, it's an experience, it's first-hand, they love it, and that should be open to the public. At the moment, under defence, the only way you can get access to the fort is come through one of our tours, and we think it should be open to the public in total.
Mr Dagg, could I ask you to make some comments in relation to particularly the risk, the Commonwealth heritage, the heritage protection of these particular parts of Fort Queenscliff is at risk if it was to move from Commonwealth hands?
As Bob has said, and that it's a risk, and that's there because of the lack of heritage going on from when when the changeover from Commonwealth to public or a non-public ownership, and that we would lose all that heritage protection. And as you stated, that then potentially opens up the whole area to other uses, as you say, 5-star hotel or houses or whatever. And that, a good example, as Bob mentioned, was Crow's Nest, which is just up the road from Queenscliff, Fort Queenscliff now, but there's no sign of it at all, or very, very little. It's all been built over, it's all houses and everything. So it's a very easy move for things to change. And then that heritage that's there now is gone, and you can't get it back.
Once it's gone forever. Dr Marmion, can I ask you to elaborate on the evidence you gave a short time ago in relation to the matters that you sought for Mr Miles to put in writing? Could I just ask you to explain exactly what happened there?
He made the point that there was 93% protection, and it sounded quite feasible at the time until we checked it out. We had questions on notice about the preservation of the assets, including the signal tower, and those questions were not raised nor answered. So during the roundtable meeting at the Queenscliff RSL, we raised the question, will Defence honour its heritage commitments? And he said yes, that Signal Tower will be restored. So we then said, great, we believe you. We thought about it afterwards and we thought, let's get it in writing. So we wrote to Celia Perkins, who was the Assistant Secretary of Defence, and said, will it be restored and when? And she came back and said, no, it won't be.
Well, that's a disgrace.
She was there at the time he made the promise and she agreed with it.
So well over $1 million, which was allocated to the restoration of the Signal Tower, has been cut. That was a firm commitment
Yes,
to this community and to the people of Victoria.
yes,
The Signal Tower is now in a shocking state.
yes.
And so nothing at all came from the Defence Minister, Mr Miles, in writing, as he said he would follow up with.
We have correspondence here, emails and a letter from Defence saying it won't be restored.
Could we have a copy of that?
Yes.
If you could table that. Thank you very much. I mean, what Mr Miles has done in the consultation that was held at the local RSL is basically say, trust us. Well, I want to put very clearly on the table, I don't trust Mr Miles. I don't trust the government to do the right thing. That's why we are saying we will keep the fort and Swan Island in Commonwealth hands. How do we not know if it gets sold off to some international hotel, there'll be an access road, all of that prime real estate around the cliff with the incredible views will all be carved off. Anything and everything could go. Because, of course, and how could we trust if it was sold to the state government? How could we trust anything the state government did? And I do want to say that Mr Chris Minns, the New South Wales Premier, has spoken out in opposition to the sale of Victoria Barracks in Sydney. We've heard nothing in Victoria. So
There's been very little consultation.
So what is your greatest fear? Because it's a varied site. There's the parade ground, there's the cliff top, there's the Black Lighthouse, the Signal Tower. There's a couple of buildings that are not heritage listed. What is your worst fear if this was sold off?
Without any heritage protection, that it will be demolished. It is some of the prime, probably, if not the best real estate views in Victoria. It needs heritage protection. It needs to be on the National Heritage List, for example, like Point Nepean is, but it needs protection, and it needs to start from the day it passes out of Commonwealth hands to the day it takes over private ownership. So that's why we're dead set against leaving Commonwealth ownership. We want it to stay under the Commonwealth.
And that's the risk. Of course, that can't be guaranteed, because if it was to move into private hands, then no matter what promises were made, that could be overridden, including by a State Act of Parliament. How angry is the community in your view, Dr Marmion?
Sorry?
How angry do you believe the local community is about this proposal?
Extremely. Like, as with the previous speaker, there's been next to no consultation. There was a meeting in Queenscliff on the 29th of April, a round table which was basically a fait accompli. People were given information like the same sort of handouts as the previous speaker, but we didn't get a chance to talk about it or it wasn't explained. And people are upset. The new alliance that's been formed to defend Fort Queenscliff has now got local, state, national and international support, saying the fort should be preserved. So there is a palpable anger in the community.
Thank you very to both of you. Thank you very much. Chair, thank you very much. No further questions.
Thank you, Senator Henderson. Senator Blyth?
Just one very, very quick clarification, and thank you both very much for appearing. You spoke about it is inappropriate for the Victorian government to take control of the site. We have concerns in terms of the heritage listing once the Commonwealth disposes of an asset, that heritage listing at a Commonwealth level disappears, and so it is then incumbent on the states to have that heritage listing. Do you have concerns about what it would mean, say the site did transfer into state government hands, that heritage site is preserved for future generations to come?
Well, we had a meeting with Alison Marchant, who's the state member for Ballerine, about a fortnight ago.
Yep.
And she knew nothing about the fort.
Yeah, okay.
She hadn't shown any interest.
Wow, that's...
And she's a state Labor member.
Yep.
No interest at all.
That's shocking. That is
They
really shocking.
They haven't done anything.
Okay. So I guess that's fair to say it's very concerning. So thank you both very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Senator Blyth. I just want to follow on that. The Crow's Nest site, you said, was just down the way, was it?
Yes.
And it was passed from Commonwealth hands to state, correct? And then it was demolished. So what, in terms of that particular story of that site, can you just expand a little bit more about what was there, and I guess what protections had been assured at the time, or you thought that perhaps would be in place that in the end weren't?
It was part of the complex, the defences at the Heads, the fortress. It was an army base in its own right, especially during the Second World War. It had barracks and a number of buildings, and it supplied the garrison for Fort Queenscliff. So it was a major defence base. I'm not sure how big it is, but it was considerable. And it passed out of Commonwealth hands, and the developers totally demolished what was there. There was no heritage protection.
Given it was a major defence base, would there have been a parade ground there?
Yes. Yes.
One or multiple?
One major one.
One major one.
And then there's a series of buildings in a square shape around the parade ground.
And
Sorry, there was the gun positions on the front, overlooking the beer.
okay,
And searchlights as well.
and that is now all gone.
The remains of the searchlight position is there, but they've been effectively, they're not standing.
Okay.
They've been almost demolished. So the original developer wanted to take the ownership right down to the waterline, but there was a hue and cry from the community saying no, the beach needs to remain open in public hands, and it was a restriction. That was the only restriction.
And so what stands on the parade ground now?
Houses.
Houses. That's pretty devastating, isn't it? Okay. I just want to touch on, you said before about, the conversations you had with the Department of Defence, that it was a fait accompli. Did you get the sense that the decision to sell had been made before they spoke with the community?
Yes.
On maintenance, your submission said that the management staff are based at Fisherman's Bend. For the sake of the committee, can you please tell us how far away that is? How long it takes to get to Fisherman's
Melbourne.
Bend? Sorry?
Melbourne?
Well, I believe that it was in the submission. I've looked up online. It says about an hour and a half. Is that correct?
Hour and a half drive.
Hour and a half drive?
Hour and a half drive.
Yeah.
So any base management staff would have to travel an hour and a half anytime something needed to be done on base?
No, you could use local contractors.
Local contractors. So what has been the impact of this outsourcing? I guess my question would be that we have heard from a number of heritage associations over the course of this inquiry that the buildings are easy to maintain when you're actually using them, when you're living in them. Given so many of the units have been moved out of the base and the management staff are either outsourced or an hour and a half away, has that had a big impact on, I guess, the cost of maintenance, but also the ability to maintain the base as it stands?
Short answer would be for certain buildings, yes. For example, the building that we have rooms in for the library, the archive and the research room, building 32, which is actually probably the predates the fort. It's the old lighthouse keepers' houses and that, and the telegraph office. It, until recently, had no heating throughout the winter. We used to describe it as a fridge because the longer you sat in there, the colder you got. It just seeped into you. It's only about 3 weeks ago that they fixed the boiler. So it's gone for 2 or 3 months with nothing being done to it. Yet we were still in there as volunteers, as were some of the defence personnel.
Why was it not fixed for 2 or 3 months?
No idea.
No, what, sorry?
I don't.
You don't know
Don't
why?
know. I'm not privy to that sort of information. We, as I say, there was reservist defence personnel in there as well, and it had all been reported long before. But it just took a long time to get it fixed.
It seems like base management is under a bit of strain there. It seems like a remarkable length of time going through all of winter without having any heating. Just in terms of remediation of the site, what's your assessment of what that would take there?
We think the $1.4 million allocated was grossly overpriced. I'm sure local tradespeople, and there are a number in Queenscliff who are experts in heritage building restorations, could do it for a lot less, probably even half.
Okay. And I just want to touch on in your submission, you said that in 1999, so we've been through this before, haven't you? You've been through this process before. There's significant community backlash then. The Parliamentary Works Committee in 1999 did its own investigation into the proposed divestment because they felt that the government had not gone through that process. Do you feel like this has been investigated fully enough by the government before they've made their decision?
Yes, very much so.
You feel like the government investigated it fully enough before they made their decision?
I wouldn't say they have investigated it, but not fully, and they certainly haven't done it this time.
Okay. Thank you very much. Any more questions from senators?
I'll just ask just one.
Right.
Thank you, gentlemen, for your time today. Just in terms of the way forward on your last page, page 5, you talk about a trust. I was just interested to understand how that would work, given some of the other examples that you've cited in your submission.
Well, we think the Sydney Harbour Trust is a good example of how it can be used, rather than selling off the land, make a better use of it. So, for example, a building might be used for retail or it could be used for accommodation, and you would apply to the trust for use of that building. So it's kept in Commonwealth ownership, it's still generating funding, and it's open to being used by the public, at the same time protecting the heritage.
How would you generate funding?
Sorry?
How would you generate funding?
Well, if there was accommodation, for example, there's really good accommodation in the fort that's been restored in recent years. There's a commercial kitchen there, there's a conference centre. They could be used to generate funding.
So you'd be not redeveloping so much, but using existing infrastructure to I don't know, upgrade, if that's the most accurate way, but to upgrade, modernise the facilities to have people stay on site, but also open it to the community. Is that would be the proposal?
Yes. Yeah. And if it was open to the public, then we would continue to run public tours or self-guided tours, but generally have it open to the public to appreciate it. Yeah. Okay.
And what you're citing is what's been used previously in the Sydney Harbour Trust. Have you done any other preliminary? I'm just interested in terms of have you done any other work in terms of rough numbers, financing, etc., or just simply putting forward the idea, look at what the Sydney Trust has done, we might be able to replicate that here?
Putting forward the idea more than anything. We haven't gone any greater depth in figures and things like that. But there is various facilities there now which are not used. As you say, there is the accommodation side of it, but things like the conference centre, I think, the old instructional centre with teaching facilities and everything there is not getting used for that. But that is a potential one that could be used. University, Deakin and that has sounded out some ideas on that sort of thing. The tours that we provide, which we would continue, at the minute are limited by the fact it's owned by Defence. So if Defence were moved out, we would be able to open the premises up to a greater extent than what it is now, and thereby look to attract funding in. And then that allows you also things like a coffee shop. You could do a franchise or something for a coffee shop in there, within the facilities. But it all adds to the attraction for people to come to the place and spend the day there.
Okay, so there's no fundamental objection to having a cafe or light accommodation, but it was just using existing facilities in order to modernise the premises. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Have you been in contact or spoken to other organisations that might be willing to set up shop or look at using the facilities? Like, I mean, you mentioned university. I think there's been some informal discussions here about Deakin Uni or other universities that might be interested. Have you had any conversations like that?
Not as yet directly. Indirectly, we've sounded out interest, but there's no commitments.
It's the problem is until Defence moves out, you can't do that. And in fact, the biggest question is not necessarily when Defence moves out; it's the day after, when it's in limbo. For how long? How the Minister Miles and lots of other people in that have keep expressing the public will have access, and it'll be great access in what it is. Well, as things stand at the moment in time, as we hold a lease to Defence to reply the tours, when that stops, what happens? For how long?
What's going to happen to the tours as of 30th of June, and what's going to happen to maintaining the site? Because what we don't want to see is what happened at Scratchley when Defence left. It was vandalised.
Yeah, and as we understood today, I mean, there's only a handful of staff on site, but I think Army itself had left in the year 2000. So there's obviously been a very big gap between when the base was used from an operational point of view to where it is today. Anyway, look, thank you, gentlemen, for your time today. I just wanted just to clarify a couple of those points in your submission, but thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Deputy Chair. Thank you very much for your time and for appearing as witnesses today. I don't believe you have any questions on notice, but if you do, could you please return them to committee by Thursday the 3rd of September. Thank you very much for your time. And I will now call representatives from the Queenscliff Community Association. I understand that information on parliamentary privilege and the protection of witnesses giving evidence to Senate committees has been provided to you. For the Hansard record, will you please state your full name and the capacity in which you appear today?
David Connolly. I'm President of Queenscliff Community Association Incorporated.
Thank you. Would you like to make a short opening statement, Mr Connolly?
Yes, Chair. We echo, just listening to the first speaker, Jane Carnegie, some of those issues are going to cross over into our presentation as well. The QCA recognises the significant Commonwealth Heritage List of values, the character of Fort Queenscliff, that necessitates matters be referred to the Federal Minister for Climate Change, Energy, Environment and Water. These are contained in the Woodhead Heritage Management Plan 2006, prepared for Defence. A number of the individual assets are rated high and exceptional, pages 28 to 30. The fort is recognised under the relevant heritage assessment as meeting criteria A, B, C, D, E, G and H. The fort is listed as National Trust A, classification site, to be preserved at all costs. This represents a spectacular garrison site that is rich in national cultural and built heritage. We hope, and part of the welcome to Queenscliff, hopefully you had an opportunity to see the site and visit it. I know some of you have seen it already. Two, in terms of the organisation we've now formed, recently the QCA joined other associations including the National Trust Geelong branch, Queenscliff and Point Lonsdale RSL, Queenscliff Historical Museum and the Fort Queenscliff Heritage Association to form the Defend Fort Queenscliff Alliance, DFQA, as an apolitical alliance of concerned organisations and individuals from Queenscliff and beyond. Vitally committed to ensuring that Fort Queenscliff remains in public ownership and highly cognisant that there are significant legislative and regulatory requirements and obligations under the EPBC Act 1999. We are going to defend and mobilise our defence of Fort Queenscliff and convey our ongoing concerns to the Senate Committee. We believe that the QCA has previously referenced in 5.1 of our concerns to the Senate Committee. The QCA has previously that we have serious concerns with process. This is further evidenced with a letter received by the QCA from Kate Gowland on behalf of Minister Watt, dated 13th of April 2026, when we first learned of this divestment process, and received from the QCA, and it is tabled today as part of the submission. And we would ask the Senate to table that particular piece of correspondence. It stated both Departments of Defence and Finance were being provided support from DCCEW and were aware of their obligations under the EPBC Act, and that both agencies were committed to exploring options with future owners to manage heritage obligations as a condition of sale. The QCA are seriously concerned this is a highly preemptive decision and that there has been, in our view, clear failure to recognise the decision to divest constitutes a controlled action under the EPBC Act and subject to clearly articulated legislative and notification requirements for referrals and assessment methods by the Minister and the Department. We have been forwarded no evidence in the letter of any such processes having been undertaken and wish to inquire whether the Senate Committee members are aware of any such processes, including any written requests made by Defence to DCCEW, whether the Minister formalised any assessment and evaluation methodologies or pathways, publicised chosen assessment paths and provided forums for public comment back to his department. If so, where are they? And if not done, why not? Nothing appears on the EPBC Act public portal. The clear obligations under the Heritage Status and Legislative Framework is documented by the Woodhead Heritage Management Plan, page 35. The obligations of defence under the EPBC Act 1999 and compliance requirements under Section 7B of the EPBC Amendment Regulations establishing the Commonwealth Heritage Management Principles are also clearly identified in the Woodhouse Heritage Management Plan. As identified in 5.3 in our Senate submission, the QCA are most concerned the proposed divestment of Fort Queenscliff by the Department of Defence has not, from the available evidence forwarded to us, been subject to the provisions and referral processes under the EPBC Act 1999 that would require an assessment by Defence under the EPBC Act, and that the proposed divestment be declared a controlled action under the Act, requiring referral to an assessment by the Federal Environment Minister, requiring, in our view, a full environmental in brackets heritage effect statement to be prepared by the Department of Defence, subject to significant impact guidelines and any other relevant legislative regulatory controls and guidelines under the EPBC Act 1999. B, that a subsequent public submission period is available prior to a panel hearing from which the recommendations of the panel hearing would be submitted for consideration by the Federal Environment Minister for assessment and decision. And C, that a direction be made by the Minister to determine the future of Port Queenscliff in the best heritage interests to manage, preserve and conserve these highly significant Commonwealth-listed heritage assets. And D, the QCA would make further recommendation that the above be added to the initial QCA recommendations forwarded to the Senate in our original submission on the management of defence assets. In our view, a fully transparent and legislative process will take considerable time, and therefore provision needs to be made for the continued funding by the Department of Defence to maintain, care and provide for continued public access and use of the fort in the interim period. Our meeting with Libby Coker confirmed any divestment of the fort would be a lengthy process. It would be a lengthy process, we argue, if correct process and procedures have been followed. We are clearly stating, as a controlled action, we do need to have a full environmental effects statement prepared, and that is open to consultation. Point 6, as such, any proposed expressions of interest relating to the divestment of Fort Queenscliff is premature and cannot legally, in our view, be undertaken until all the legislative requirements imposed on the Minister under legislative provisions and processes in the EPBC Act have been undertaken. Such processes cannot be avoided, ignored, nor preempt any decisions on Fort Queenscliff. We are aware of the change in the legislation in the EPBC Act, the ethos of fast-tracking and so on in terms of approving matters far quicker than they had been, but we believe an asset of this quality to the nation deserves time and it deserves careful thought. The QCA fully supports its position statement and conclusion identified in the QCA submission on the management of defence assets. Without preempting a decision made by the Minister, the existing independent and expert recognition that at least 93% of Fort Queenscliff represents significant and complex heritage values and constraints. It represents a site that, in our view, seriously limits the expectation of any private ownership and requires some tested models of perpetual public ownership, such as a trust model, to preserve and conserve this important heritage site. Under good heritage management, there are noted requirements and an ethos for precautionary approaches to be adopted and undertaken and not result in adverse outcomes. We do, just before closing, we do note in terms of the roundtable and the community session that was held with 200 people turning up, that Swan Island is being taken off the table according to that particular night, so that it's not an issue, or decisions are out of this particular divestment program as we understand it. We also make note in the correspondence that comes back from the department. The Minister knows exactly what his responsibilities are, but the department tend not to be giving answers back to us on the way forward in terms of a pathway. We didn't get a pathway process that was afforded to Cerberus. We want to be very clear that that pathway process is identified, and we want to make sure that once even a decision to divest is to some degree a preemptive decision. If we haven't gone through all the options, we haven't gone through what characters of the fort need protection and how we're going to manage it. The other point before closing is that the last heritage management report we've seen has been in 2006, 20 years ago. Now, under the Act, these are supposed to be updated regularly, every 5 years. Now, compliance of that nature, if that falls away, We've also noted in terms of our issues relating to the signal station and the dry ditch, which continually gets flooded. We've brought that to Defence Estate's attention regularly. They say go back to Defence for self-assessment. We say we need proper management. We don't want to see these particular assets left vacant. We want to see public access. We do want them preserved, as the obligations of the EPBC Act clearly state. There is an obligation on government. And going back to the National Estate, when it was set up, we set this particular estate up to protect our heritage, our cultural heritage. It's too important to lose. This is an iconic site. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr Connolly. Before I throw the call to Senator Henderson, if anybody's interested, just take a look at the North Head site in Manly, the old School of Artillery, where everybody was moved out from that particular site to Puckapunyal, and now the buildings are all boarded up 20, 25 years later and overrun by bandicoots. This is what can happen. Senator Henderson, I pass the call on to you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Mr Connolly, thank you so much for your evidence today and for appearing and for your advocacy. How upset is the Queenscliff and broader community as a result of this divestment proposal?
In terms of initial, I suppose, presence, we don't shy away from a fight, and I think that's been evident even with the disastrous destination Queenscliff a few years ago, where the fort wasn't under, I suppose, under attack then, but the site around it was. Very quickly, 1,000, 1,200 signatures appeared, and there were mass demonstrations. This particular site, I think, one thing that it does curtail it a bit is that our community has been restricted in access and enjoying what it has to offer because it's been in Defence hands. Once it gets opened up and appreciated, we believe, if we let this asset go, I think there'd be significant demonstrations and upset about the fact that this significant heritage asset of the town, really the core of the town, is crucial to our township, and it's acted, as we said in our submission. It started off as a civic function and maritime installation for the RIP. It then developed into, well, at that stage, even with the cricket ground, football ground, particularly the cricket ground, where it is now the parade ground. It operated as a sporting facility, hosted the first Aboriginal cricket team before they managed to escape to eventually head to England. We also then note that since 1880, it has been garrisoned off restricted entry, and in essence, we would find that any attacks on the heritage and the heritage values. We do note in that submission and questions asked in relation to what is the vacuum after Commonwealth goes or divests, who fills the vacuum in, and how long is that particular period? If this was left a day, a week, a month, a year without heritage protections, we understand that once Commonwealth heritage is listed, it then has to go through a process of Heritage Victoria. Doing it, it then requires them and the council then to set the zonings and planning, which could take an enormous amount of time. So
Mr Connolly, if I can just stop you there and just very briefly, Destination Queenscliff was a big fight in relation to eco cabins, which were proposed right next to the fort, and I joined with the Queenscliff community in fighting that particular proposal. So we have seen what happens when the integrity and social fabric of this community is under threat. But going to, and you've heard the evidence today, the sorts of assurances that you received from Mr Miles and Ms Coker to date, How do you characterise those assurances, and do you have faith in them?
In terms of the assurances, in terms of how the progress forward, we don't know how assurances can be given without a process being developed by the Environment Minister. Now, it's all very well to have assurances coming from Defence saying we're going to protect the heritage, but unless it goes through the correct procedures and processes, these are meaningless to the degree that until the real person who needs to make the decision, the Environment Minister, actually makes the decision, we can't, I suppose, accept any promises until we know the process that's going to take place.
And once the fort, if it was to leave Commonwealth hands, then there are no guarantees, because anything could happen, including Acts of Parliament being passed, which will override all protections. So I guess that's the biggest threat, and that's why we have committed to keep the fort in Commonwealth hands. But how precious is the fort to the Queenscliff and broader community, in your view?
Well, it is the significant site in town, really. It's potentially rich in terms of offering a narrative and story. It forms really the central element of what we've proposed for the National Heritage listing, which absorbs Point Lonsdale, Shortlands Bluff, Queenscliff and Point Nepean into a historic narrative story that combines the elements of three historic sites forming into a national heritage proposition that's sitting with the Australia Heritage Council under Bob Carr. If the fort goes and it loses its cultural significance, or that's diminished, part of that particular story goes with it. So we very much want to retain it. I know, going back to 1999, when the Staff College moved, the then Heritage Advisor for Queenscliff got up in the Joint Committee and stated how important the heritage relating to defence use was. And we see that even retaining some elements of defence, cadet use, etc., is so important to this particular usage going forward.
Mr Connolly, I will put on the record this is not the first time that Defence has proposed to sell off Fort Queenscliff. As the local member for Corangamite, around about 2015, the then responsible minister, Mr Chester, came to me and said, "What do you think?" And I said, "Over my dead body."
Yes. Yep.
And so I think there's been an ongoing campaign by some in Defence to sell off this precious asset. And so that obviously took a big fight when we were in government, but it's now clear that the community and, frankly, all Victorians and Australians who care about our military history and heritage need to double down and fight, because I would put to you that selling off the fort is completely untenable.
It is. Yeah. We don't see a way forward removing it out of Commonwealth hands. We have that correspondence from 2015. It's has a loaded file of materials that have put Fort Queenscliff continually under the radar, I suppose, on the map to be sold off or divested. But the language we're concerned about is that no one, the politicians are saying divestment. Now,
no, the Labor politicians, not us.
Yes. As Q, we've been looking at some of the Senate committee hearings, and divestment is usually couched in sale, and that's our concern.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much, Mr Connolly. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Senator Henderson. I just wanted to touch a little bit on the questioning from my colleague just now. You mentioned before, you were talking about an asset of this quality, and you've said in your submission that one of the recommendations that you paused divestment sale for nationally significant defence estate assets. So I guess putting it in those terms, this isn't just a local issue. It's not just about the good people that are here today fighting for this prized community asset. It's about the broader nation as well, and the national story and the military story too. So if you can just talk a little bit about, I guess, why Fort Queenscliff is a nationally significant asset, please.
Well, I think going back to in our submission, it's been independently, expertly assessed. In 1982, Peter Lovell, part of Alan Lovell, made reference, and I think going back in memory, he was so overawed by the fort, he put in a category of potential elements of world heritage. Now, we think there is international appeal. We have assets which are even outside the wall. Within the wall, we've got black lighthouses and so on, which are unique. But outside the wall, we've got some of the rarest examples of colonial defence histories or assets in the world. Combining that particular story and bringing people here when there is an international appeal is not only national, local, state level, it represents international significance. And some of the assets that are here within the fort were exported from England. They were tested here to some degree, and we were the, because we haven't perhaps updated some of those particular assets, we're the custodian of assets that are seen nowhere else in the world, or very rarely in the world. So in terms of identifying how important it is, I think out of our hands, the experts are saying it is of those particular qualities and how it meets the strict heritage criteria.
And yet, and in your evidence, in your submission, you have said that it could suffer demolition by neglect should the Commonwealth sell off this site.
Yes, we see that continually with heritage assets. Heritage requires money. All these buildings around here require money, and not only, I guess, money, they need expert assistance in terms of how best to use the money. And we do note and pick up the point about the signal station. Perhaps it's an overblown quote to get that fixed up. We have witnessed, for example, in relation to the Custom and Lighthouse building, when that was being upgraded, or I suppose restored, the length of time the scaffolding was up was astronomical. No work was done on it for months while they waited for asbestos or doing some of the roof repairs. We're very unclear also that what the actual maintenance bill is. I know in 1999 it was targeted as $100,000 per annum. We asked Finance for an updated maintenance figure. We're still waiting. So in terms of upkeep, we believe that demolition by neglect is a real concern for us, and we would stress to the committee that part of the job today is that they go back and seek out the Minister for Environment, see how he's going to actually process what we believe is this controlled action, subject to a very strict process, and then once experts then further go back over the last 20 years of no reports and update their reports, then we can get a much deeper understanding of what needs to be done.
If you do get a response back from the Department of Finance about maintenance costs, I think the committee would be very interested to hear that. We did hear from Defence Minister Miles when he was announcing the fire sale at the front of Victoria Barracks, Sydney. Part of the rationale for selling Victoria Barracks, Sydney was that The maintenance costs were going to be $20 million over the next 5 years, or 10 years rather. So, but that had jumped up. Sorry, $200 million, $20 million a year, but that had doubled on the costs of the previous years. So I think the numbers are getting a bit fuzzy on all of this.
Is that for the entire estate?
Just for Victoria Barracks, Sydney.
Just for one building?
One site, yes. Number of buildings on the site, but yes. So I'll be very interested to hear if you get a response on the maintenance costs there.
Well, we'll bring it to the finance's attention once again, or Defence Estate's attention again, but we have sent emails, and if, for the record, the Senate committee want to see the emails sent and the responses, we're more than happy to supply that. Everyone seems to go missing when it comes to numbers and precise figures, so we would desperately, from our point of view, want to know what it does cost to maintain the fort. We don't think it's of a significant amount of money, but even having stated that, the National Estate is priceless and it needs to be supported, and the buildings and the facilities do need support. They can't be obligated, relinquished or ignored.
Thank you very much, Mr Connolly. And if you have any questions on notice, would appreciate if those answers were returned to us by Thursday, the 3rd of September. Senator Blyth.
Just really quickly, sorry, and I know we are running behind time, so I'll keep this very, very brief. You've talked a lot about the heritage and the importance of us being able to maintain that, and to be able to have cadets to be able to go on to sites like Queenscliff, I think is incredibly important. Do you have views? I mean, we are living in the most dangerous strategic times in Australia or globally that we've seen since the end of World War II. There are a lot of people from the community that are here in the town hall today to listen to this. The importance of the younger generations to be able to learn about our military history. This particular fort is so important in terms of Australia's military history. First warning shot fired across the bow of a German ship that was trying to leave the bay. All of this is so strategically important in terms of learning that, given what we're seeing in the Strait of Hormuz, thousands of kilometres away. Do you have a view on that you would like to share with the committee as well?
I think it's important for people like the cadets and even students appreciating living history, and I think that's an important element, that this fort is living history. It is representative of a bygone era to some degree, but it has a special atmosphere, and I think rather than go into a drill, perhaps a hall remotely, or a new facility in Geelong or Melbourne, it wouldn't be the same. We're also conscious that back in the 1850s, we were jumping at shadows to some degree, and built the most garrisoned fort in the Southern Hemisphere, and it cost an enormous amount of money. Who knows, in terms of warfare and drones, etc., what the future is going to be. But our position would be that if this fort went out of Commonwealth hands, out of public hands, into private ownership, it is lost forever, can never be retained or recovered. If it is going to be recovered, it would be at an enormous cost.
I think that's the important thing, is a strategic asset once sold off is very difficult to get back, should we ever need it. And given what is happening globally, it seems like a poor timing to be selling off strategic assets.
Well, in terms of access to the Port of Melbourne,
yes,
this is highly strategic.
It genuinely is. Thank you very much,
Thank you.
And sorry, Chair.
That's okay.
Oh, can I just mention Crow's Nest? I think, just correcting the record there, I think it went from Commonwealth hands automatically to private sale, I think, from memory. So that particular aspect was it. And
But the state government would have had to zone it as a housing development.
It probably would
plan.
would have gone through that process. Again, I don't think the heritage, if there was any, it was attached to it. I don't think that at that particular part it may not have been an important element, but certainly there would have been a transfer of some sort. But I think the Commonwealth Government and Defence received all the money.
Okay. Thank you very much. And just to clarify my evidence too, Mr Connolly,
Yes.
it was for Victoria Barracks Sydney, it was 50 million over the previous 5 years, up to 200 million over the forward 10 years, according to the Defence Minister.
Okay.
Big jump there. Thank you very much, Mr Connolly. We will now move to the community session. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're now going to move to the community session, and please come forward as I call your name. And I will be calling people in pairs, and I will ask the pair to sit at the witness table, please. So first up, we will have David Mitchell, and is Robert Owlich here? Robert Owlich? Robert Owlich? Yes, thank you. If you would please make your way to the witness table. Thank you very much. In the interest of time, the Secretariat will be timing each presentation 5 minutes each. Thank you very much. Mr Mitchell, would you like to state your name?
Thank you. My name is David Mitchell.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senators. I am a past Borough of Queenscliff councillor and resident of Queenscliff for 30 years. The Queenscliff Fort is a monument of national significance. The public value of the fort has been underappreciated over a long period due to the fact that the public has been isolated from the vast potential value of the fort to the people of Australia, due to the fort having been a high security working part of the defence establishment, locked up behind its walls and the imposing large, black, solid wooden gates. I am most concerned that the proposed divestment of Queenscliff Fort by the Department of Finance has not already been subject to the provisions of the EPC Act that would declare the proposed divestment a controlled action. Under the Act, by definition, the fort is a protected matter, and the divestment, by definition, is a significant impact. Consequently, the proposal is a controlled action requiring to be prepared a full EES that is environmental, includes environment, heritage, planning, ownership scenarios, impacts, social effects statement to be prepared by the Department of Defence. A period allowing public submission on the EES, the appointment of an independent expert panel to consider the EES and the public submissions, and that the panel make recommendations to the Federal Minister for Environment to determine the future of Queenscliff Fort before any transfer to the Department of Finance. The process will take considerable time, as provision needs to be made for funding by the Department of Defence to maintain and care for the fort, together with providing long overdue public access to the fort in the intervening period. I might summarise by saying that the elephant that should be in the room in regard to determining and providing guidance for the future of the fort is the Federal Minister for the Environment. Can I finish by making a specific reference to the subject of my written submissions to this inquiry, and that is drawing a distinction between the use of the fort as distinct from the ownership of the fort by a private entity or organisation. The ownership of the fort by a private entity or organisation is wholly unacceptable for one reason, and that is, in the event the private entity or organisation failing financially, going broke, the fort would be left to languish and deteriorate in the absence of a continuing responsible legal entity. The financial failure of a private entity or organisation can be considered highly likely, given the conservation burden of the fort and the potentially small commercial footprint. Consequently, the fort needs to be administered and managed by a continuous public legal entity, being in effect a perpetual custodian, such as the Sydney Harbour Federation Trust, which reports to the Federal Minister for the Environment. The Queenscliff Fort Trust would first need to prepare a business plan that recognises a program of maintenance and care of the fort, funded in large part by providing public access and vetting and permitting private events, conferences, functions and even medium to long-term leases, for example, for education and tourist accommodation. I urge this inquiry to have the Department of Defence fulfil its obligations under the EPBC Act to declare the proposed divestment a controlled action, to engage the legislative machinery to enable the preparation of a detailed assessment of the fort to guide and conserve the fort's future. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Orlich.
My name's Brad Teal and I'm President of the Queenscliff Golf Club and have been for approximately 30 years. I'm joined today by other members of the Golf Club, the committee and our membership base. On behalf of the Queenscliff Golf Club, we've already provided to the Defence Committee a submission outlining our interest in purchasing the Swan Island land on which our golf club has operated for 119 years as part of that ADF divestment plan. The key points in the submission are that the submission sets out the important information about Queenscliff Golf Club's long-standing operation on the island and its deep and enduring community roots to Queenscliff and the Bellarine Peninsula since 1907. Our submission outlines key considerations and recommendations that we respectfully ask the Defence Committee to consider. We also ask the Committee and Defence move more quickly in its sale, as the club as a community asset has uncertainty of length of tenure now, and it makes it very difficult to employ staff and/or fund machinery and capital investment with a short runway on our licence. I would like to highlight several key points for the committee's consideration. Queenscliff Golf Club has been a part of Swan Island since 1907, when the first 5 holes were laid out, as well as being a trusted neighbour and licensee for all of those years. The club currently has 456 financial members. In the last 12 months, there were 39,000 rounds of golf played on the island, including 24,000 visitor rounds, and this demonstrates significant economic contribution to the Queenscliff and surrounding Bellarine Peninsula. During the peak time of Boxing Day to Australia Day this year, there were 5,600 visitor rounds of golf on our golf course. Queenscliff Golf Club has invested heavily in the layout of a golf course, the infrastructure of a clubhouse, paths, car parking, curator sheds, water storage and irrigation across the some 40 hectares of the course layout. The overall island, that is the western portion planned for divestment, is 126 hectares, but our course occupies approximately 40 hectares. Queenscliff Golf Club is especially mindful of the environmental management plan which we have signed up to, and I have copies here for you, 39 pages of elaborate information. We've signed up to that, and we are mindful of the way we conduct that EMP, and we are, by way of audit and commentary, adhere to the strict guidelines. A significant portion of Swan Island is at or close to sea level, and areas of the island have already been subject to tidal inundation, including our 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 7th, 11th and 12th holes, and we've demonstrated as an organisation our ability to adapt to the risks and hazards of future tidal change and influence, with up to 1.5 kilometres of bunding to stop that tidal surge onto our golf course. The golf course land is adjacent to and includes Ramsar protected wetlands, and we are mindful and protective of those wetlands, and in fact have expanded them under Ramsar guidance and grants over recent years. We maintain a strong relationship with the Department of Defence and understand the sensitive nature of the Swan Island Defence Base. It is critical that any future occupant of Swan Island will be able to work with security arrangements at Checkpoint 1, the use of a single-lane bridge, work with the base and understand the obligations of being restricted at times in the use of the bridge, plus daylight hours only operation of the golf course. A round of golf at Queenscliff Golf Club is on average 30% cheaper than surrounding golf courses, making it one of the most affordable community golfing options in the region. Golf participation has substantially grown over the last 5 years, with more than 4 million adult Australians playing the game, which is growth that very few sports can match. The long-standing value of Queenscliff Golf Club to the borough of Queenscliff and the Bellarine Peninsula is undoubted, and we have significant local economic input while being affordable and accessible for recreation by the wider community. Queenscliff Golf Club's social contribution is also considerable, including donations to Bellarine Railway, Queenscliff Lions, Queenscliff Men's Shed, Cottage by the Sea, Queenscliff Primary School and many other organisations where donations of rounds of golf are provided for revenue raising. We look forward to being given the opportunity to secure the island as an incumbent occupant as per the 4th of February 2026 statement, where the incumbent was to be given the opportunity to secure the land. And the subdivision of the western portion of the island, the conditions of access, not only for the golf club but also for the yacht club, because that has access up to the Checkpoint 2 by way of a Parks Victoria licence, not Crown land of the federal government, plus conservationists and and bird lovers who are regular visitors to the island. And it is a complex project to protect the base and consider all stakeholders signing up to the aforementioned strict terms of use. If there is a failure of the sale process, we would like the opportunity to extend our current licence on similar terms and conditions, and we look forward to being favoured with the negotiations as per the 4th of February 2026 statement, which said that the incumbents at Queenscliff Golf Club would be negotiated with directly.
Thank you very much. And it was Mr Teal, was it? Thank you for your contributions. I'm just going to ask a couple of very quick questions. When was the licence last signed with the Department?
Last year for 3 years. So in February 29, we expire.
So you signed on February 25?
Yes, but that was continuance from February 26.
So you signed from February 26? When did the discussions start with the signing of the licence? For that?
10 years ago.
10 years ago. And was the signing of the licence before or after the announcement of the full-scale?
About the same time.
Please. Oh, I can't. Sorry, broadcasting won't be able to hear you, so if, we might just sit. You can take it on. Yeah.
Yeah, but about the same time, we were informed in the middle of last year that we would only be given a short runway of a licence because of the impending sale.
Okay. All right. Yes.
That might be the department calling you right now.
Sorry?
That might be the department calling right now.
Senator Henderson.
Chair, thank you very much. Mr Teal, as you know, the Coalition has committed to keep both Fort Queenscliff and the golf course as part of Swan Island in Commonwealth hands. However, I just want to place on record and talk to you a little bit about the lease negotiation process. My view is that you've been really, taken through the ringer in terms of your lease negotiations over many years. And I would like to see, certainly if Swan Island remained in Commonwealth hands under our government, a much more certain arrangement for you, a very long lease, so that you've got the ability to plan for your future. Can I just clarify, are the leases generally about 3 years, or are they?
No, we can have up to a 21-year Crown lease.
And what's been the history in recent years? Have you had a 21-year Crown lease?
When we got to 10, we had an extension to last year, and then we went to 3 years last year to incorporate this sale process.
Because that doesn't give you any long-term certainty at all?
Well, it's not enough time for us to give reliability to a new employee or borrow money from an institution where you have enough time to amortise the cost of repayment across.
Exactly.
It's just not enough time.
So just want to assure you and all the members of the golf course, the golf club, sorry, that if it was under our government, if we were elected, and given the commitment we have made to keep Swan Island in Commonwealth hands, certainly my view as the local Geelong-based senator and our very strong view collectively, and I've spoken to the Shadow Defence Minister James Patterson about this, is that you deserve a very long lease, because without that you don't have the appropriate certainty.
I agree.
Thanks very much, Mr Teal.
The uncertainty of the whole thing from our point of view is that in talking to Defence we understand the process, but since it's gone from the community hearing on about the 28th of April, we've not heard anything, and it's gone to Finance. We understand that the island has not been surveyed or valued, and conditions of use have not been written for anyone to understand the process, and that's our uncertainty.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. That you're okay? You want to add anything? Okay, that's fine. Okay. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate your testimony today. And I will also remind witnesses not to disclose any personal or private information you speak, as the hearing is being broadcast live. And a Hansard transcript will also be prepared and published online. Thank you very much. Okay, I would now like to call to the witness table Mr David Kenwood and Mr Adrian Barber. Thank you very much.
Am I a cadet parent? A future cadet parent. My son is too young.
My name's David Kenwood. I'm a long-time resident of Queenscliff. I have a family connection with the fort. I actually had a grandfather that served at Fort Queenscliff. I'm really pleased the Senate committee is having a deeper look at the planned divestment and sale of our fort and what it means to our historic town. I'm a member of a number of civic groups in the borough and indeed in the Bellarine. And I'm also a member of the Queenscliff Community Association, and I support their submissions, including calling on the Federal Environment Minister to become more deeply involved in the divestment process under the provisions of the EPBC Act. I also support the fort staying in public ownership, using a heritage trust model similar to that used at Fort Scratchley in Newcastle and the former defence properties in Sydney Harbour. An ideal mix for me would be to have some educational facility also co-located on the fort site. As you know, Queenscliff Fort is located on an elevated 7-hectare site at Shortlands Bluff, which is arguably one of the best coastal locations on Port Phillip Bay. It's certainly Queenscliff's most important heritage asset. How many Victorian towns would have an 1860s fort as a gateway feature. I have a number of concerns about the current process, where the divestment and sale seems to be put before any planning safeguards are in place. Perhaps the most important question in the whole divestment and sale process is how the current government heritage protections covering 93% of fort buildings will be carried forward once the site is sold into private ownership. And I note that this has been discussed with previous presenters. However, two measures have recently been suggested by the Federal Environment Minister's Office. One, a covenant on the contract of sale to bind a future owner, and two, use of relevant state heritage register to ensure continued heritage protection. The Victorian Planning Minister has also indicated that once the property leaves Commonwealth ownership, it can be listed under State Heritage Act provisions and further underpinned by the Queenscliff Planning Scheme heritage provisions. Indeed, this week Queenscliff Council planned to nominate Fort Queenscliff for National Heritage listing. It seems at this point there is no definitive answer about how those protections are going to go forward. What is also unknown is how the site will be suitably zoned and by whom, and whether or not Queenscliff Council will be involved, and at what point will this take place. Now, I've heard some of the federal bureaucrats talk about this, and I've heard them say that they will discuss with a future developer what zonings will apply to the site, and then we've had another bureaucrat suggest that Queenscliff Council will be involved at some point, but we're still unsure. So at the moment it remains in Commonwealth hands with no state zonings or overlays applying to the site. Fort repairs, the signal station tower. I'm very disappointed that the previous assurances by Defence and politicians that the $1.4 million allocated for repairs to the historic 1888 signal station tower will no longer go ahead. Other repairs to the perimeter wall and timber buildings are also desperately needed. I note Defence are planning to undertake repairs to Swan Island Bridge, which will benefit the sale of West Swan Island and their army base. In my view, Defence should also undertake a repair program for Fort Queenscliff to bring it up to an A1 standard before considering any sale process. Recent press releases indicate Defence plan to spend more... Sorry?
We're just at 5 minutes, Mr Kimwell, so I'm
Okay.
not sure how much longer you've got, but just giving you that warning bell.
A Defence plan to spend another $20 million on re-auditing the 67 sites. This gives the impression that the initial Defence-sponsored assessments that underpin the selection of sites was not a thorough process. I've been to a number of meetings, 6 or 7 in fact, where politicians and bureaucrats have given us all sorts of assurances. And initially we were told that due to the heritage protections, the fort divestment and sale process could go on for years. But more recently it's been suggested the divestment from Defence to Finance will happen on the 30th of June next year. Some clarifications about the true timelines for the process would be beneficial. I'll finish up by saying a plaque placed on the main gate at Fort Queenscliff by the National Trust of Australia says it all for me. The inscription reads, "Classified A, of national importance, to be preserved at all costs." Thank you for the opportunity to speak about our fort.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kennedy. Mr. Barber, would you like to make a contribution?
Thank you. I promise I will try to stay under 5 minutes. And I'm glad you mentioned, Senator Bligh, about cadets, because I'm a Defence-approved civilian helper for the squadron down the road in Geelong, just down near Senator Henderson's office. I'm not going to talk about the closure of Queenscliff because I think that's been covered enough. But what I am going to talk about is the impact of what is happening with that program, because we've moved. We're out. We were told about the 29th of April at Geelong RSL that we would have to move. 20th of June, we had our final parade for our squadron. That afternoon, we packed up about 60 to 80 years of history.
Sorry to interrupt you. So, sorry, you were told on the 29th of June that cadets...
No, we moved on our final parade was on the 29th of June.
Right.
The site that we're at was put on the divestment program.
Okay.
And we were advised formally, sorry, my apologies, we were advised publicly of around the 29th of April. It was discussed at the Geelong RSL when the committee made its representations there.
Okay. What is the address of this particular site?
The old site was Sherborne Terrace in Newtown, opposite the football ground, and we are now at the Newland Barracks in My Street. So, as I said, we've moved. No fuss, no malice. We just got on with it, because that's what we do. I hope your child does soon as well. Our old facility is still vacant. There's no for sale sign. So our 13 to 18-year-old cadets are an amazing and incredible bunch of kids. They're strong, resilient, committed, determined group of kids. Why should they be parading out in the rain and the cold? Why? We're still waiting on shipping containers for all our equipment. Those 3 shipping containers worth of equipment is sitting on the floor in the hall that we are meant to be parading in the cold weather. Our IT systems are sitting in a pile. Can't use them. We can't use the defence facilities for obvious reasons, completely understandable. God help us if we've got to change the light globe. We're using our own personal technology to deliver training programs at the moment. Why? Because we can't use the internet in the facility. So the Department of Defence has been clear in its investment in drone technology. Even August last year, $600 million, and I heard on the radio this morning the Border Force is also looking for drone technology. We've got boxes of drones that we love to use for our cadets. Can't use a single one of them because there's stuff all over our floors. We can't use them outside because they're not the right drone. Also, it's a live active base, but we're right next to Barwon Hospital where they've got their emergency helipad. So that's a big no from CASA. So at the moment, all of our drone training is on hold. If we do get containers, and I'm hearing they are coming, if they're not ventilated and they're not suitable for all of our equipment, including defence-issued uniforms, they'll go mouldy, they'll have to be thrown out, and they'll need to be replaced. Now, if we can get some shelving for the containers when they do arrive, that'd be fantastic. Only problem is, should we use the Bunnings barbecue money that we raised to fund those shelving? Because, again, we don't know when these things are going to happen. We need to get moving. Just to make things interesting, we're going to have to move again because the Newland Barracks is also on the Defence's divestiture list. So effectively, this decision is going to impact every single Air Force Cadet squadron southwest of the CBD of Melbourne when we take into account RAF Base Laverton and RAF Base Williams at Point Cook. I'll come back to what the Office of the Deputy Prime Minister said in a moment, who is, I should point out, my local member. We take the youth of today and we build them into the leaders of tomorrow. We've got a rich history of the ADF accepting cadets. Many of our members who are currently as a staff will go on and join the cadets. I'm actually joined online and by 3 members of the Cadet Training Corps in this room. So have a chat to them when I finish. And I promise I'm getting to the points as well. We take the cadets, they're young, they're naive, they're scared, some of them have little to no self-esteem. One of them, I remember, wouldn't even walk into the squadron, they were that scared. When we finish with them, they are amazing, young, resilient, enthusiastic members of the community, some of which may become members of the Defence Forces, or the Victorian Police Force takes quite a few of them as well. So what am I asking? 2 things, and I am going to give you a solution to one of your issues as well. I'm asking that as these divestments happen, that you treat, and I should say, not you, the committee, that the Department of Defence and the Department of Finance treats those impacted with respect and promise what they are going to deliver. That will allow us to continue to provide the training programs that are provided to us to provide to those cadets. So I said I'd give you a solution. I see that RAF Base Laverton is down for partial divestment and that Point Cook, RAF Base Williams is down for full divestment. Sell RAF Base Laverton. The facilities there are not up to what they should be. Point Cook, as a RAF base there, is also home to the Cadets Aviation Program. If RAF Base Williams goes, I would pretty much put money that the Victorian branch of the Cadet Aviation Program will close. Their aircraft will be shipped to another state. Their purpose-built facility will no longer be housed. It will probably be torn down for land. October 3rd or October 1st, I can't remember which one it is, has our 4-wing annual parade. Come along, see what the cadets do. Talk to their parents, but more importantly, have a look at the facility, but also have the vision to see what can be done. Moving a lot of the infrastructure and a lot of the services out of RAF Base Laverton to Point Cook to RAF Base Williams will be a big benefit to both the community, but also it will open up a very, very large block of land. I believe it's 290 acres of prime land in inner Melbourne. It's right next to a freeway. It's right next to a railway line, so public transport is great. And I can also advise that every major fast food outlet is just around the corner from that side as well. So again, I simply ask this. Help us to help our young community, but most importantly, let the Department of Defence and the Department of Finance know that, yes, there are people impacted by this, and as a realist, I can understand the benefit of using taxpayer funds wisely and efficiently, and those facilities as well. But keep in mind the human impact of what this divestment program is going to do. Senator Bligh, Creswick Barracks is your nearest one. Senator Collins, I believe you're Sydney-based, so you'd be up to Randwick or Darlinghurst. Senator Ciccone, if I'm not mistaken, you'd probably be Hawthorn or Surrey Hills if you're Robinson. Senator Henderson, 150 metres down the road. Come and say hi. Thank you.
Look, I just wanted to ask a couple of follow-up questions. So where you were in Sherburne Terrace, Newtown, was just around the corner from where I grew up also?
Yes.
At the top of Aberdeen Street?
Opposite the football oval.
That's right, which is the home of the Newtown and Chilwell Football Club, for anyone who doesn't know. Why were you required to move? It just, I mean, it's a small site, you're opposite the oval, you've got cadets to age between 13 and 18, engaging activities that require open space. You've now been moved into Newland Barracks.
Correct.
With no open space.
There is open space there
but you can't use
for some areas. We cannot do drone training.
Drone training.
Correct.
So what's the point? I mean, this is a very small block of land that you are utilising, but has been there for a very long period of time, and also in the Newtown community, which of course would be near where many of your cadets would live.
Senator, I'm going to make a guess to say the fact that there is no heritage listing on that property that I'm aware of meant it was an easy box for, that could be ticked quickly. As I did say, though, we need to move again because Newland Barracks is going to be divested as part of this program. We don't know where we're going to go. The Office of the Deputy Prime Minister has advised me there is no set time or location and that discussions are ongoing as to where we go next. Could be 2 years, could be 3 years, could be 5 years. I will point out that it's also for the Army Reserve has a presence there as well, and their requirements must be met, as is the other Air Force squadron that also shared Sherborne Terrace, and also the naval training ship that was down on Eastern Beach. They've moved in there as well. So we're all moving again, but we don't know where and we don't know when.
So why the rush? I mean, you are obviously an easy one, as you say, an easy box to tick. And this, of course, your Sherborne Terrace is in Mr Marles' electorate of Corio.
It is.
Have you met with him and talked to him about this?
The Deputy Prime Minister, about 2 weeks after, maybe 1 or 2 weeks after the Geelong RSL visit on the 29th of April, actually came down to the squadron. Now, that was a different night to the night that we were there. I am told, I did not hear this myself, he thought that we were reservists, not cadets. I do not know why that particular squadron, that particular location was divested so quickly, but again, I am not aware of any heritage listing on that property, so I would suggest it could be low-hanging fruit.
Yeah. And so is this now just sitting there empty?
It is. I drove past there this morning. There's no signs out the front. I drove past Newland Barracks this morning to see if there was any shipping containers. Again, in fairness, and I should point out that our defence contact or defence liaison officer has been doing his absolute best to get things done. They are not there. They could be here this week. They could be here next week. Could be there next month. In the meantime, we parade outside. We do our classes inside. We just have to do it a different way, but that's what we do. We just get on with it.
But cadets is obviously critical for the future of defence. I mean, there's a massive, frankly, crisis with defence recruitment in this country, and if these kids are not looked after and not inspired, and then perhaps inspired to join the reserves and then perhaps even to join defence, to join Army, the RAF or Navy, then you lose these kids.
My daughter's going to a Defence Force work experience place in RAF Base Edinburgh next month. I'm driving her over there for 1 day so that she can go and do that. My eldest daughter, who ages out this year as hopefully a cadet warrant officer, has been to no less than 3 Defence Force work experience programs, including a live-in one in RAF Base Amberley. She had an absolute ball. Will you get cadets going to the armed services? Absolutely. Is that what we are there for? Not necessarily. We do not push the armed services or the Defence Force to say, if you come here, you must do this. However, there are clear benefits for those who are interested in going down that path, that they can learn about the experiences and get some idea of what real life is. But as I did say before, some of our instructors are also members of the police force. They are also very interested in looking at what the cadets have been doing.
And just a final question, because your home is now up in the air, do you think that's going to impact the number of cadets who will seek to join?
We lost cadets because we had to change nights. So we used to parade on a Tuesday night. We've had to move on a Wednesday night. For many of the cadets that were there, I think we lost about 10 or 12. Unfortunately, that had clashes with other things. But at the end of the day, the uncertainty is, where are we going to go? If we've got a cadet that's in Lara, as an example, which is up near the Yuyangs, near Avalon Airport, and we end up at Warren Ponds, they're not going to go there. It's going to be way too far, and that's completely understandable.
Well, I'm very sorry to hear what you've gone through. Thank you very much for your important evidence today.
No worries.
Thank you, Senator Henderson. We are also very sorry for what you've gone through as well, and if you are looking for some shelves and you need them quickly, there are a lot sitting over in the old archives that aren't being used at all anymore. Just a point of clarification, can you the exact location of where you were originally?
We were at 48 Sherborne Terrace, I believe, in Newtown, which is, we'll call it Western Geelong. We are now in Myers Street at the Newland Barracks.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Barber and Mr. Kenwood. We appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
Could I please call Stephen Coulter and Kerry Erler, please? Okay, thank you. Would you like to state your name and give a 5-minute submission, please, contribution?
My name is Stephen Coulter. I'm a Point Lonsdale resident. Chair and Senators, thank you for your time today and for allowing me to make a full submission late last week, which I believe is on the public record now. My name is Stephen Coulter. I'm a Point Lonsdale resident and an independent strategy and placemaking consultant with experience across financial services, travel, tourism, placemaking and local transport. My connection with Fort Queenscliff is also personal. My great-great-grandfather, Thomas Bush, served with the Victorian Artillery through the 1870s and 1880s and was acting Sergeant Major at the fort during part of its formative years and died in the fort in 1888. Now, for well over a century, two of Queenscliff's most commanding places, Shortland Bluff, where the fort is, and Swan Island, have been shaped by military use and constrained public access. These divestments create a once-in-a-lifetime or once-in-a-generation opportunity to change that while preserving the military heritage. For Fort Queenscliff, I support continued public ownership and under an appropriate trust or stewardship model with the Commonwealth meeting remediation and essential conservation costs. Public ownership does not mean government has to operate everything. Specialist heritage, hospitality and tourism operators can invest and operate under long-term agreements while the fort remains publicly owned. We know this can work. At North Head and Middle Head in Sydney, former defence lands have been conserved while opening them for walking, recreation, interpretation, cafes and compatible uses. Nearby Q Station, or the old quarantine station at North Head, it combines public ownership and accommodation, dining, tours and major events. And Werribee Park, close to home in Victoria, while not military, demonstrates a similar principle that conservation of important buildings can happen while there is commercial use. There are different models, but the same lesson. Heritage protection, public access and careful activation can reinforce one another. The Swan Island Golf Precinct is different. I'm less concerned about who ultimately owns it than about what government secures before its divestment. My written submission makes 5 specific requests. I want to bring them together today under 3 broader recommendations. First, open the gates. At Fort Queenscliff, establish regular 7-day public access from early morning through to evening to the grounds, open spaces and appropriate heritage areas. The public should have access to it. Not every building needs to be open, but the fort should become part of everyday Queenscliff rather than primarily a place entered through controlled tours. And apply that same principle to Swan Island. The defence checkpoint at the Queenscliff end of the bridge currently controls access to both Queenscliff Golf Club and Queenscliff Cruising Yacht Club, as well as to the military base out there. Yet a separate military secure checkpoint already exists further onto Swan Island, protecting the operational defence facility. As the civilian precinct is divested, remove the Queenscliff end checkpoint and retain defence security where it's actually required, at the existing military entrance. This would enable normal golf and yacht club access, twilight golf, evening hospitality and events, and opportunities for walking, cycling, nature experiences and carefully managed water access without reducing security at the defence facility. Secondly, let these places earn their future. At the Fort, allow sensitive reuse of appropriate buildings for hospitality, education, culture, events, and limited accommodation where heritage permits. At Swan Island, allow complementary uses that strengthen rather than displace golf. The objective is not maximum commercialisation. It is about enough economic activity to support conservation, public access, community use and long-term viability. Public ownership of the Fort and a different ownership or long-term lease structure for the golf precinct can still support coordinated specialist operators across both places. Thirdly, write the public promise before deciding the property model. For the Fort, establish binding protections for its heritage, collections, public access, compatible reuse and reinvestment in conservation. For Swan Island, secure permanent civilian access across the bridge, protect community golf and resolve the Queenscliff end checkpoint before divestment rather than leaving those issues to a future purchaser. And judge the outcome by more than the sale price. Consider heritage, public access, defence security, recreation, environment, local economic benefit and long-term sustainability. Decide first what outcomes should endure for generations, then choose the ownership and operating structures best able to deliver them. Fort Queenscliff should become a living national heritage, protected through use and valued in everyday public life. Swan Island can demonstrate that removing unnecessary military controls from civilian land can increase public value without reducing security where it matters. Open it, connect it and protect it through use. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And just for everybody's awareness, we now have 30 minutes left for the session and about 7 people to get through, so we will be keeping to time and perhaps a little bit shorter on some of the submissions. Thank you very much. Please.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name's Kerry Erler and I'm the President of the Queenscliff Maritime Museum, a volunteer-run accredited museum established some 40 years ago and not far from the Fort. But we consider our landscape as part of our museum, considering our maritime heritage of this location. So you may ask why the Maritime Museum is here about a defence property. It's the same story that we are telling that the Fort tells: the signal station, the Black Lighthouse, the fishermen and their families, the mariners, the sea pilots, the lifeboat and the RIP. This is our collection and the Fort is the same story. So at the outset I want to say the committee of the Queenscliff Maritime Museum supports the divestment away from defence. That does not mean we support the sale of the Fort, but we support the divestment away from defence because from a heritage perspective they have been poor custodians of the site for decades. So their job is defence. It's not to protect heritage, but we expected them to do so. It was part of their mandate on the site while they were operating it as a staff college or a base. So we can already, you mentioned earlier the demolition by neglect. Officers' mess is gone, the drill hall is almost to that point. If you went there, you would have seen the signal station, you would have seen Building 46, a number of other buildings that have no floors in them and haven't for at least 15 or 20 years because they have been neglected, because they weren't part of the requirements of defence. So our position is that there's an opportunity here and we should not pass that up by getting too bogged down in the past, but the heritage is the future of that site, and we are very much focused on how we can go down that way, and I support what Stephen has said about some opportunities for across the whole of the state. But I've sort of concentrated a bit on what the review said, what the audit said, and the process to date, and I've got 3 findings that we came to, and I want to state them and then I'll just detail them if I have the time. So the Commonwealth's disposal framework contains no heritage test. So I drew up my own heritage test in accordance with the page in the audit review, which is 96, which shows the flowchart, which includes a heritage gate. I've provided that to the ministers and including a briefing on how that could easily be operated to ensure we've got that heritage gate built into the process. The audit commitments that would have protected heritage were deleted, deferred or cannot be verified, and I prepared a document which I'm happy to share, which talks about which ones have been agreed, which ones have been agreed in principle, and the impact of those on the fort. So I'm happy to table that. A divestment decision stops conservation before any change of ownership or sale occurs, and we have evidence of that in relation to the signal station, and I'm not going to go over that again, although we have had the same response. My question for the senators, if they can take up the point, is when did Defence make that decision to defer the spend on signal station, and when did they cancel it? That was obviously before the results of the audit were announced, but when in that period of time did they hold off when they'd already made that decision? The point that they said in their letter that most concerned me was that, and I've got a quote in my notes where it talks about that the longer-term protection of the site's heritage values will be, in their words, addressed as part of the site divestment process. So that is of a concern because the divestment process can take, well, probably won't really start fully for another couple of years. And so I think that is a greater concern, but also the fact that in the letter to me, they mentioned that they think they are meeting their heritage obligations and there's no OH&S issues related to the building, and I think you've all seen photos of bits falling off the signal station. So I would like the committee to take up the point with Department of Defence is how did they make that assessment that there was no heritage issues relating that they needed to address in accordance with the Act, and how is there no health and safety issues associated with that? I think that's an important thing to do. Obviously have a lot of correspondence that I have sent to ministers and Department of Defence. I have received some answers, but 8 specific questions I've received no response, and I've got some questions here I'd like to table for the committee to take back to Defence and get some answers. And I think that the most important thing from a maritime heritage perspective is the issue of let's shape an opportunity here, let's go forward, let's build on our heritage, but we need to get the process right. And my experience so far, having spent 20 or more years working for the state government, that Defence have neglected their engagement with the community and with organisations. They are a command and control organisation, so I recognise that. But there is an opportunity, there's strength in this room, there's strength in a number of communities who could provide advice on how to better engage and to reach the process outcomes. I think there's issues associated with the process, but from a maritime museum perspective, we want to embrace the opportunities for a new future for the fort.
Thank you very much, Ms Earle. Did any senators, colleagues have any questions? No? Okay. Thank you very much, Mr Coulter, Ms Earle. Thank you for your contributions today. I now call to the table Ms Sandra Milne and Mr Graham Hobbs. Okay. Ms Milne, would you like to state your name and please make a contribution?
Thank you. I have 2 copies of documents. May I table these? Because I won't go through all the information in them, obviously, with the time constraints. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for the opportunity to present. I do want to start by just acknowledging the Watharongan Wathaurong people of Queenscliff and the Bunyurong and Boonwurrung people of Mornington Peninsula as the custodians of their land. I'm also aware that the land at Cerberus, which is what I'm speaking to today, is of cultural significance to the Bunurong people. We support the submissions of Save Western Port and also the position of the Mornington Peninsula Shire in regard to the potential sale of the Cerberus land. I don't want to review what Save Western Port has said. Instead, just focus briefly in a bit more depth on the knowledge we have of the importance of the ecology at Cerberus. We have archives dating back 55 years and there's been a lot of mapping of Cerberus over that time. And I also just want to make a point about the Finance Department's audit and the significance of not including environment as a part of their considerations, and also the mention of the Cerberus land as vacant. It's in fact really high value land. And just a really quick word on biodiversity. Biodiversity is a living history. A lot of the land on Cerberus, as has been mentioned, hasn't been touched for 100 years. We live on an old continent. Our environment has had to adapt to that, and that reflects in the flora and the fauna of the environment that we live in. So to have an untouched piece of land that has been allowed to develop and grow and continue for that amount of time provides us with really rare and important opportunities for research. We know that a lot of the medicines, for example, that we use in Australia that have been developed worldwide for cancer, for example, have actually come from Australian bush. And there's so much we don't know yet about how our bush develops, what it includes, and what opportunities it can give to us for further really important information as we go forward, particularly facing climate change. So the untouched nature of Cerberus, just to highlight, is highly valuable. It's definitely not vacant land worth no value. And we obviously believe the proposal to sell the particular hectares of land that's currently not directly used for defence purposes shouldn't proceed. Just a word on that too. We're a little unclear about how many hectares it actually is because the map we were provided with at the consultation was questioned for inaccuracies, and then we were told that it was indicative only. So you may hear varying interpretations of how many hectares of land that there are. The development of this land would permanently adversely impact on critical and rare fauna and flora and fauna at the site, including Sandy Point, Hands Inlet and Stony Point. And although we understand that Defence may want to focus more on its core business, a one-size-fits-all approach to how it goes about divesting some of its land is not appropriate. Defence has legislative obligations under the Environment Protection and Biodiversity Conservation Act to identify, assess and monitor the heritage values of its properties, including areas with exceptional natural, Indigenous and cultural properties, regardless of whether they're on the Commonwealth Heritage List. So we ask that Defence actually release any ecological work they have done to date at Cerberus to the community, including any ecological management plans. We do know they have had ecological management plans, but we're not privy at the moment to the studies that have led to those plans, apart from previous mapping that we have copies of from the 70s and the 80s. If the divestment were to continue to proceed, matters of cultural heritage and ecological significance must be listed and referred for assessment under the EPBC Act. We would ask that this involves a process of independent expert information about the biodiversity of the area, including a thorough ecological survey conducted over 2 years to take into account the fluctuations within the seasons. Continuing community consultation, including with Bunurong First Nations representatives, and any divestment outcome to be determined by an independent expert committee that doesn't just look at finance, that looks at the overall environmental experts' opinion and First Nations people's input. This asset is highly significant ecologically, and I'll just outline a few quick facts to support that. There's a lot more detail in the handouts that I've provided you with. Just taking Mornington Peninsula, for example, there's less than 30% remaining original native vegetation. 27% of that is within parks and reserves. A lot of that's been cleared. 5% is on private land. The land at Cerberus provides 2% of the bushland of the whole Mornington Peninsula, so it is significant in that component. Much of the other...
We are just at 6 minutes now.
Sure.
Perhaps if we could circulate the facts, or...
Certainly, I'll do
just
that.
wrap it up.
Yep.
Thank you.
I will just say... I will say one thing. The land is also in the top 1% of fungus diversity, which impacts on the flora and fauna there and why it's so important. And we do have a statement included in that from a scientist at the Royal Botanic Gardens, which I'd urge you to read. Given one of the Defence estate audit recommendations considered the continuing defence requirements under the EPBC Act as too great a financial burden, we would also suggest, as others have, transfer of the land to another Commonwealth body, such as the Department for Climate Change, Energy and Water, for continued preservation and management.
We really are going to have to wrap it up because we do have to finish by 3:30, and we have
community consultation and thorough ongoing biodiversity studies.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Please, sir.
Good afternoon. My name's Graham Hobbs. I'm the President of the National Trust of Victoria Geelong Branch. We have 850 members and there's been submissions put in by head office. Perhaps I might encapsulate one comment. As Australians look to the future of the defence estate, the message is clear. Heritage is not a burden to be managed. It is an opportunity to be embraced. Now, I'd like to, if I could tender these as a copy for each, just a summary of what I've got here, plus some information in relation to the very good submissions which have been presented by a number of people. There have been numerous and other detailed submissions and solutions focusing on the Fort Queenscliff and Swan Island, Queenscliff, particularly by the local organisations which we endorse when considering the evidence, statutory requirements and solutions to the terms of reference A to H, which I've included in that bundle there. These included, but not limited to, the submission 12 from the Fort Queenscliff Heritage Association, submission 40 from the Queenscliff Community Association Incorporated, a letter the 2nd of March 26 from the Queensland Community Association to the Minister of Defence, Assistant Minister of Defence, then Minister for Environment and Member for Corangamite, and then today's submission from David Connolly from the Queenscliff Community Association, which you've all heard. As a trust organisation, and not wishing to reinvent the wheel, the proposed to create a Fort Queenscliff Trust under the Department of Climate Change, Energy, Environment and Water, it's DCCEW, similar to the Sydney Harbour Trust, be established quickly to avoid the deterioration of assets at Fort Queenscliff and waste of resources, and avoid a situation as occurred at Fort Scratchley, Newcastle in the beginning of this century. I've detailed a Wikipedia extract related to Fort Scratchley, which highlights unnecessary deterioration of heritage assets which can be avoided, plus the historical connection to both the forts being designed by Lieutenant Colonel Peter Scratchley in the 1860s. It's also a classic example and precedent of successful management. That's included in the big folder.
Yes.
Of Fort Scratchley.
Thank you so much. I was just going to say you have tabled this, which we are able to read.
Yes. Okay.
So
well,
just in the
maybe
interest of time.
I would, in the time, I'd like to. There was a question raised by Senator Henderson in relation to the importance of the fort. Well, I have a statement from Vivian Lewis, who was a guide for a number of years, and I think it's really worthwhile to read it out to the public because I think it really encapsulates quite a lot of these things that we've got. The British military installations around the entrance to Port Phillip were established to protect Melbourne and the state of Victoria from perceived foreign threats at a time when Victoria was one of the richest territories in the British Empire. Okay? The structures remain today as a powerful reminder of the debt we owe to those who have served and sacrificed their lives for our nation, whether through military action or within service through training and workplace accidents. The fort, the command centre of the active artillery units located around the port's entrance, remain today as the largest and most intact of the many fortifications around Australia's coast, a fact recognised in its numerous buildings and structures being nationally significant heritage registrations. Beyond its significance to Australia, the fortifications of this region are of international significance because of their pivotal association with one of the most devastating and widespread events in our history, Great War. Other countries around the world venerate past military actions that educate millions of visitors to the horrors of war with reenactments of historic battles such as Gettysburg and Culloden, preserving and utilising similar military battlements to underscore these messages. Here we have a site which is unique in the world, with the first shot of World War I taking place merely metres away at the command of the Fort Queenscliff Army personnel, an event that heralded the engagement and death of hundreds of thousands of combatants, including our own soldiers. This historic event alone should be a reason to preserve Fort Queenscliff and its surrounding military remnants as a tribute to the sacrifice of freedom. For this significant event to be repeated at the same site with the same gun to herald the outbreak of World War II is hardly credible, yet so it is. Thus, the site becomes significant beyond its other similar structures in the world's history of conflicts. Fort Queenscliff should be maintained intact in Australian Crown possession, not placed at risk of insensitive development from either domestic or foreign ownership. It represents an asset to the people of Australia. It's worthy of UNESCO World Heritage listing, to be developed as a cultural destination befitting its significance in world history under secure permanent custodianship. I have 8 points in summary, which I'd like to mention.
We are at 5 minutes now.
You can read that. I'd like you to appreciate those, and thank you for the time. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your contributions today, and thank you so much for all the preparation that you've done for it too. And we will read through that thoroughly. I'd like to call now Mr. Legg, Chris Legg and Dr. Peter Collins, of no relation to me.
I'm a local from across the Bay. I've come across the Bay because I followed your committee and I agree with everything that's said about Queenscliff, but I think the issues run far deeper. I'm a former advisor to the Minister for Foreign Affairs during a time when we sent people into harm's way. I've worked closely with our Chief of Defence for 15 years. I'm an ethicist. I'm not a useful doctor with a Medicare provider number, and I'm a CFA volunteer. And I speak with those voices. The first is, at the core of this proposal of divestment is a flawed finance policy, absolutely flawed. There are claims of increased defence spending. Those claims are false. There's a 10-year plan and there's a 4-year forward estimates in which our operational capability is cut. Nothing in politics counts with 10-year plans unless it's in the forward estimates, and it's not there. The defence investment plan, therefore, is uncosted, and selling these properties without any commitment to reinvest in defence, to my mind, is a derogation of a government's duty of care and its first interest to protect us. The second is there's no commitment to increasing the capability of our ADF. I was there, Senator Henderson, at a time when you were at the ABC and we sent people into the Sandline mercenary crisis. I was there in the Foreign Minister's office. We went into East Timor. We had Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan. We've been in every theatre of war continuously since 1945. This crude, un-foreign policy-like approach, we just send things north, and I watched the defence officials try and explain it, is not based on strategic analysis. Very sharp-minded people in Australia, the US and the UK think we are on the wrong path and we can't explain our strategic intent and posture, so the rationale doesn't work. The second is, a further point is, I could live with this if we're going to do something for veterans. I would encourage the four of you senators to listen to your fellow Senator Jackie Lambie. She used words in the chamber that she was tormented by the government's policy. I could live at the margins. I don't want this probably to go. But even the fact that the government will not give an extra cent to the veterans tells me this policy sits at the core of a broken defence policy. I am a local. I look across the bay. I realise why they love it here. And I operate across there. We have sites across there in the Mornington Peninsula. The most precious to me is of the nurses at the War Memorial outside HMAS Cerebus. My great-aunt's sister was killed in the Bangsla Island massacre in February 1942. I place a flower there or a note there every time I go. There is nothing stated by Defence as to how these shrines will be looked after. There's an assumption that they will be. I checked with the War Memorial yesterday. We have had 2 million Australians go to war since 1900. 2 million. The idea that this is real estate, these are national sites of heritage where people trained and will continue to train to go into harm's way to defend us. And we will send them and do that. And let me just finish on a perhaps unusual note as a CFA volunteer. Across at the Mornington Peninsula, which is the 8th highest risk area in the state, this is the 2nd highest in the Bellarine Peninsula, the Defence Force is integral to our community safety. We train with them, we do vegetation work. The idea you're just going to move the forces north and not provide resources to deal with these issues. Senator Blythe, you know the Adelaide Hills, the Dandenongs is the worst. The idea you can just move people north. I'm one of 50,000 volunteers in this state. I arrived here on Ash Wednesday. We just avoided Ash Wednesday and Black Saturday last year. We're expecting a worse fire crisis this year. We've started working on the 1st of August. So I would hope that if the government were to decide to go down, I think, what is a deeply flawed path, it would be upfront with us at what they're going to do about the emergency management implications of moving defence people away. I think you've just got to be upfront and either say, well, we're not interested, or that's for the volunteers to cope with, or be really upfront with us. And I think what concerns me most in all of this is that the government is not being upfront about the lack of defence policy, the financing, the diminishment of operational capability, what this real estate means, and even to the extent of leaving us in the driest continent of the world, in the southeastern corner where we live, facing a worse summer than we have ever had before. So I put that on the record. Thank you very much, Senator Collins, and I'll keep following this committee. It's great. You're televised live. It's compelling viewing. Thank you.
Not so much viewing today, but for all of the people in the great audience here, they are. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Collins, and we have we'll have time for just one more contribution. Thank you very much. It is now 3:28, but we will give you a few more minutes to make your remarks.
Thank you very much. And I think I'm going to be a bit of a disappointment after the passion and breadth of that evidence. My name's Chris Legg. I'm a resident in Queenscliff. I have a connection, as many others do apparently, through my wife's family, to the fort going back to the 19th century. I'm also one of the residents who are not angry, but are certainly keenly interested in what will happen with the fort. I haven't picked up on that anger. Perhaps I'm talking to the wrong people, but I have been talking to people who are really interested to know how what's happening with the fort could actually make access better and make it a bit of a keystone for a future development of Queenscliff, which is in need of a bit of a vision at the moment. And if you walk around, you may sense that as well. My perspective is also influenced by about 45 years in the Commonwealth Treasury, in or around the Commonwealth Treasury, on things like financing, private financing of public goods, infrastructure, foreign investment. I was the member of the Foreign Investment Review Board, Commonwealth State Financial Relations, as well as a little bit of time briefing people on the National Security Committee of Cabinet and the defence budget. So I've got a little bit of background in this. It's a big issue. It's a significant issue. We all know that. There are undeniably significant challenges. You've heard many of them. I share many of them. I think they're well based. But I think we have to focus on the opportunity as much as the challenges. The status quo is neither sustainable for the government nor anywhere near optimal in terms of the preservation of the heritage value or the level of community access to that heritage value at the moment. If this opportunity is going to be realised, freeing up resources, perhaps wrongly, but nonetheless freeing up resources that the government wants, and ensuring the community has more access, then it's going to need another source of presumably off-budget resources from somewhere, right? To fund those public goods. I think it's a bit too early to start being prescriptive about what how you could use the site to generate that value, and the various models you might use to facilitate it. It won't be straightforward. I think we need to be open to imaginative and innovative proposals that would actually acknowledge the heritage value and harness that to provide the financial return needed to preserve and leverage it for the new owners and the community. The trust fund has been mentioned. I think it'd be if that was workable, if there was a political willingness to do that, and the funding could be provided from other sources, because the trust fund's really a governance structure. The funding's got to come from somewhere else. That could be a very good solution. But I wouldn't rule out the possibility of other mechanisms of getting private funding into this, or private financing into this. You may need bespoke arrangements to do that. Certainly in the context of the Finance Department's Commonwealth Property Disposal Policy, there's no obvious market for this asset as it is. So it will lead us eventually to the off-market options. And given the importance of the cultural and historical heritage element, that's clearly a public purpose in terms of the Land Acquisition Act under which finance will be operating, points towards concessional terms or some continued targeted public sector stake. It doesn't have to be wholly owned to achieve what you want to achieve. There could be a targeted public-private sector partnership if well designed and protections are involved. I do think there are sort of 3 or 4 things that need to be in place for this opportunity to be realised, because I think the odds against it being realised are quite high. One is all the things people have said about the importance of auditing, restoring and preserving the heritage value that is there now, and ensuring that arrangements are in place to take us through the period where Defence then hands over responsibility, I understand, to finance, but perhaps with some environment involvement. That needs to be clear and it needs to be bedded down.
Just one more minute, Mr. Leake.
Right, okay. Well, we need time. That's the other thing I was going to say. You're going to need time to explore all the opportunities there. There will be experience elsewhere outside of Australia that should be looked at and assessed and monitored and decided. And I think you're going to need a robust commitment to credible community consultation and genuine involvement if you're going to preserve the social licence for all this throughout that period. That's quite a protracted period, I think. And finally, it would be really good if these discussions our energies would be focused on the policy choices, which will be quite complex, rather than the politics. Thanks.
Thank you so much. I'd like to thank everybody for taking time out of their day today, a good 3 hours, to show your support for the inquiry. I really appreciate everything that you've done to prepare for it as well. Thank you for all the evidence and contributions that you made, and that does conclude today's hearing. Please stay tuned for updates from the inquiry too. We will be publishing the report on the 15th of September. So thank you very much for your time, and thank you to Hansard and Broadcasting for their assistance to the committee. Stands adjourned.